énormément d'années de
We,
travail qui ont été faits
it's a
tout ensemble
whole
pour
load of
réaliser
work
ces
that
innovations.
we've had to do for those innovations.
Est-ce qu'il y a des quarks?
Are there any people who are quarks
Ouais,
in the
ok. Qui ne
room?
sait pas ce qu'est un quark?
Yes. Who doesn't know what that means at
On va
all?
vous mettre à jour.
Okay, well, we're going to tell you, don't worry.
Les quarks, ce sont les
The
personnes qui ont suivi
quarks
la
are
formation pour
people
être,
who have followed
on va dire,
training
actionnaires
to
actifs
be
et
an
donc
active
participer
shareholder,
à ce qu'on appelle la galaxie
to
d'action, qui est
participate in what we call the
l'ensemble des
galaxy,
personnes qui œuvrent
all
pour
the
faire
people who
grandir
work
la
together
planète.
to
Donc, c'est des
make
formations qui sont disponibles
us
sur le
grow.
site à tout
And there are
moment.
people who are
Donc, en ce moment,
available on
on ne peut pas
site
s'inscrire d'action en ligne,
at
mais
all
par contre,
times.
s'inscrire pour se former.
And if you want
Soit
to
pour être
be a
collaborateur,
shareholder,
soit
you
pour
can
être
always
quark
register to do that. You
à
can
tout moment.
volunteer to be a
Donc,
quark
vous
if
êtes
you want.
bienvenue dans la galaxie
You will be
pour
welcome in
aller
our
plus loin et
particular
vivre
universe.
à votre échelle.
And
Est-ce
you know, you
que,
can work as
est-ce qu'il y a
much
du
or
monde
as
en tout
little as you
là-haut ou pas
want.
encore
Are
quasi?
we okay? Technically, yes, it
Encore 10
would appear
personnes?
that we are indeed.
Ok. Alors,
We
qu'est-ce
have
qu'on aurait
about
d'autre
10
comme
people
sondage? Qui
online.
a lu le livre Pisser sous la douche
So,
ne suffira pas?
right, who has
Ah, pas
read the
mal, une bonne
book,
vingtaine.
right, about the,
Alors, il
right,
nous reste quelques livres qui
pissing in the
s'appellent
shower
encore
is not
Pour
enough
lequel il y a
now?
encore Time for the Planet un
About
peu
15
partout. Donc,
people.
ils sont
So,
assez
you
connus
know,
maintenant. Il y en a plus que.
we are
Je crois qu'il y en a
mentioned
9000
more
qui ont
and
été
more.
vendus. Et on avait tiré
I
10 000.
think
On aurait peut-être dû
that
attendre
we
3-4 mois de plus pour
published
changer de marque en fait. Mais
10,000
voilà.
copies,
Donc, il en reste encore 1000.
and we're
N'hésitez
very
pas.
proud of that.
Ils sont disponibles sur
Don't,
le site.
you know, so if you want a copy of the book, it's
Qu'est-ce qu'on
available.
aurait
You
d'autre
can
comme
get it.
sondage à
Order
faire?
it online.
Ah oui, si,
What
parce
other
qu'il y a les
news do we
gluons.
have? Are there any gluons here?
Il y en a 5-6. Donc,
5 or 6?
les gluons et gluons sont les
So
personnes
the
qui sont
gluons are people
chargées
who
d'accueillir
are
dans la
in
galaxie
charge
d'action.
of
Donc, si vous devenez quark, vous allez
welcoming
être
people
accueilli
in our
chaleureusement
universe.
par
So
un
if you
gluon
become a shareholder,
qui
you will
va
be
juste vous dire
welcomed and
bonjour
hosted by a
et vous
gluon
expliquer comment
who
ça
will
marche.
say hello
Qui
and
est-ce qui a déjà
explain to
passé
you
des appels
how
au call
things
center?
work. Has anybody called our call
2,
center?
3.
2 people
Alors, les
have.
care centers, ce sont des
So
personnes
the
qui
care
appellent les
center,
nouveaux
these are
actionnaires. Là
people
encore, que
who
pour, alors là, c'est
call the
vraiment
new
que pour leur dire bonjour.
shareholders to say hi.
Et c'est quand même encore des milliers et des milliers de
And
coups de fil qui ont été passés.
there are
Et ça
thousands
fait une
and
vraie
thousands of
expérience
calls that have
incroyable
been
pour
made, and that's
ceux
a
qui ont eu la chance
wonderful
d'être appelés, parce que
experience.
les 110 000 actionnaires n'ont quand même pas tous été
Because
appelés,
the
mais il y a encore
10,000
beaucoup qui vont l'être.
shareholders have
Est-ce qu'il y a
not
d'ailleurs
all
des
been
gens qui ont
called, in
été appelés
fact.
par des gens du care center?
But is there anybody here who has been
Ouais,
called,
la
contacted by the care center?
quand
Yes,
même,
there are.
statistiquement,
Great.
on est à peu près sur la bonne proportion
So
par rapport au total d'actionnaires.
statistically, it
de
looks as though
2019.
we're in the right proportion. 19
Ah ouais,
people here
encore
who are
7-8. Donc là, 2019, il y en a une centaine à peu près,
in
150.
2019. There are about 100.
20, ouais, dizaine, 21.
20, about a dozen, 21
C'est
more.
sur 21 et 22.
You know, so this is pretty well balanced.
Est-ce qu'on est bon pour les entrées là-haut?
Are we okay? Is everybody here?
On va pouvoir y aller?
Can we start?
Ok.
I thought we had started.
Je pense qu'on va pouvoir démarrer parce que le
So
site
yeah, we're
est
going to be
prêt.
able to start.
Donc c'est Laurent
So,
qui va introduire.
Laurent is going to begin.
Pardon. Ah, la task force. Oui, très bonne question.
Oh,
Qui
don't
est-ce
let's
qui est dans la
forget the
task
task force. Who is in the task
Alors
force?
là, on a une grosse marge de progression.
Ah, right. Well,
Parce
we
que
have a lot
la
of
task
room
force,
for
c'est très
improvement
important.
here
S'il y en a qui sont
because
sur
this is
LinkedIn
very
qui
important.
voient par moment
If there are
beaucoup de
people
posts passer d'un coup
who
qui
see a
parlent
lot
d'Action pour
of
la planète, c'est
messages
pas en grande partie
going
parce qu'on a
by,
la
it's
task force, ce sont des
because
groupes
of
WhatsApp
the task force.
que vous pouvez
They're
intégrer
WhatsApp
et dans
groups
lesquels en
that
fait
you can join if you
on envoie
want.
les visuels à partager et
We
ça c'est
send
un
visual
très gros
aids,
canal de traction pour nous, c'est hyper important
and it's a
parce que
really
si on a des fonds à
important
investir,
source of
d'ailleurs
communication
c'est dans
for
le
us.
rapport, c'est
And you
pas
can
de
read
fonds
this in the
à
report.
investir, pas
It's a
d'innovation,
place where
pas
we can
d'innovation, pas de
invest.
TFTP, pas de TFTP,
Right, there are a lot
pas de
of
TFTP.
innovation going on.
Donc ça, c'est fondamental
And
parce que une
so
grosse
the
partie de
task
tout
force
ce grand bazar
is
part de la task force.
fundamental.
Donc si,
It's a really
vous
important
pouvez intégrer ces groupes-là,
way
c'est
of
top parce
acting, and
que
you can
c'est pas
join the
grand-chose à
task
faire,
force
c'est
if
juste
you want.
un
You don't want to have to
copier-coller
do
et
very
boum, ça
much,
part
you know,
sur
just
LinkedIn, mais ça fait un
stick
effet
and
incroyable.
paste.
Même LinkedIn nous a dit qu'ils avaient
And
aucune
on
parade par
LinkedIn
rapport à ça, ça part de
said,
partout.
you know, that
C'est
things
pas
are working
spécialement
pretty
une bande
well.
de team qui fait ça, c'est vraiment juste plein de gens
So
d'un coup qui postent la
there
même
are lots
chose
of
au même
people
moment.
who
Et
participate,
ça
you know,
crée un effet de
at the
halo et
same
d'autorité.
time
Et vous allez
in
voir que la notoriété, c'est
responding
fondamental,
to our
pas que parce
posts.
qu'on a besoin de fonds et
So
d'actionnaires, mais
this
aussi
is
parce
really
qu'on
important
apporte grâce à ça
because
des clients
thanks to
et
this
des soutiens
communication,
politiques pour que
we
nos
are
étoiles,
giving
celles qui doivent se
political
développer, celles qui
encouragement,
doivent amener ces
backup,
technologies, ces innovations dont on a besoin pour
and
notre monde.
this technological innovation is an important way of communicating for us. Laurent, are we good?
D'accord, ça marche. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres choses, d'autres sondages
Anything
je
else
demande
that
à
we need to
l'Institut.
mention?
La chaîne YouTube de la communauté. Alors, qui est inscrit à la
Oh
chaîne
yes, the
YouTube de la communauté?
YouTube channel.
Ah, il y en a quand même. Il y en a
Do you know that?
plus de
Yes, there are
14,
some
c'est
people
vachement
who do
jeune.
know about that. Great.
Autre sondage?
Any other polls?
Qui a déjà vu... Très bonne question, excellente question. Qui est déjà venu
Great
à l'Assemblée
question.
générale?
Who has
Ah,
already
très bien, donc c'est super.
attended
On espère que ça vous donnera envie de-
an extraordinary general
Ce
meeting?
ne sera pas des sondages tout le long, normalement, il n'y en a pas. Je
Right, we're not
précise
going
pour ceux
to
qui sont-
carry out polls all through the meeting, don't worry.
C'est pas une tradition bizarre.
It's not a tradition, it's not a weird tradition in the
J'ai
company.
blague, bah, là, il y en a déjà une, je crois. Qu'est-ce qu'on aurait d'autre? Non, je suis sûr qu'on peut
What
trouver un
else do we
sondage.
have to say?
Ah, qui a déjà vu le calendrier de la communauté?
Who has already seen our community calendar?
Donc, pour
About a
information,
dozen
calendrier de la
people.
communauté- dans le calendrier de la
So
communauté, vous pouvez
the
faire beaucoup de choses.
calendar, you'll see a lot of different things, but you won't see any
la
dates.
caractéristique principale de ce
And that's the
calendrier.
speciality
Et,
of
je
our
trouve que
calendar.
artistiquement, vraiment bluffant.
Artistically, it's
Je vous le conseille aussi
amazing.
fortement.
And I
Par contre,
really
où est-ce qu'on peut
recommend
trouver encore le calendrier de la communauté? Ça,
that
c'est
you go and have a look. Where is
parce
it?
qu'on n'a pas encore l'endroit où on retrouve tout.
Well, we don't really have the place where we can put everything, which you can find easily. So where is it, the calendar?
Le disque qui n'est pas encore sorti, qui est annoncé pour plus tard. Ah, très bonne question aussi. Qui est devenu actionnaire
Another
pendant
question.
l'opération des 100 000 en fin décembre, début janvier?
Who became a shareholder during the action of 100,000 in December? Ah, some people.
C'est bon, on va pouvoir parler d'Assemblée Générale maintenant?
So can we
Eh bien,
talk about
je vous
the general
accueillir
meeting?
Laurent Morel, le maître de cérémonie.
I'm going to
On va pouvoir
hand
démarrer.
over to Laurent
Bonsoir tout le
Borel,
monde.
who's our MC for the
Bonsoir,
evening. Good
merci
evening,
d'avoir
everyone.
patienté. Généralement,
And
on
thank
commence
you for
vraiment à l'heure. Je
waiting.
pense que c'est la
You
première fois
normally
qu'on
we
attaque
do
un petit
start
peu en
on
retard,
time,
mais ça permet de faire des
but
blagues,
that
des votes, et
means,
puis
you
comme
know,
ça,
that we
Mehdi
can
est très détendu
do
pour
a
la
few
suite.
jokes, and Mehdi's
Donc,
really good
donc
at
merci à tous d'être venus
telling
ce
jokes.
soir. On a la chance aussi
So
d'être
thank you for
accompagné de
coming.
Denis, également un des
We
cofondateurs de
have
Team
Denis,
for the
who is
Planet.
also the co-founder of Team for the Planet. Thanks for
Et
the
donc, on va
applause.
animer cette
And we
assemblée
are going to
générale.
run this
Donc,
general
on a un certain nombre de
meeting
résolutions,
where
14,
we have a
qui
certain
sont
number of
très
resolutions,
certainement
14 in
plus
fact,
importantes que
which
d'autres, mais en tout
are
cas, on va passer
some are
sur
more important than
l'ensemble de
others.
ces résolutions. Je vous propose
But
tout de suite de
I'm
commencer
going
avec
to ask you
le
to
programme. Donc,
begin
maintenant, tu as la
immediately
tablette,
with the
Mehdi, tu peux
program.
passer
Where's
sur
the clicker?
Ne me confiez pas
Here
la
we go.
tablette, je vous en prie.
le temps qu'on se rôde et on est bon.
So here's our
Très bien.
program for this evening.
Donc, le programme, on est parti donc pour a priori à peu près 2 heures d'assemblée
The
générale.
meeting is going to
Il y a
last
un peu de
about 2
formalisme au
hours.
départ sur les
There are some
assemblées
formal
générales. On va
elements which are
d'abord
is always the
s'occuper de la
case
nomination
in
qu'on va devoir
general
nommer un président de
meetings.
séance
We're
et
going
un
to have
secrétaire de
to
séance, ainsi que
appoint
des
a
scrutateurs.
chairman
Ensuite, on vérifiera le
and
quorum, on vous expliquera
scrutineers.
si
We
on
have
trouve
to
le quorum,
check
pour
that
ceux
we
qui
do
ne savent
indeed have
pas
the
ce qu'est le
quorum.
quorum.
We'll tell you
On
what a
verra
quorum
donc l'ordre
actually
du jour. On
means.
pourra vous lire, si vous le
And
souhaitez, les
we will have a
rapports.
look
C'est
at
un peu
the
fastidieux en
agenda.
fonction,
We
pour
can
donner des exemples
read the
de
reports if you
documents
really
qui
want
sont
us to.
suivants.
This is a little bit
On vous fera par
painstaking,
contre après, ça sera quand
but
même plus sympa, une
what we
rétrospective de
probably
tout ce
will
qui s'est
do
passé en
is
2022.
give you
On
a
vous envoie
summary of
dernièrement
everything that
bilan
happened in
de l'ensemble de
2022,
l'activité sur
the balance
2022.
sheet,
Et on va
review of
retrouver
all the
ensemble pour
activity in
justement reprendre tout ce
2022,
qui a
and
été
we'll
fait
have a look
courant
at
2022.
that
Et dans
calendar,
lequel
that
on
list of
retrouvera
events
aussi, en fonction
together.
des sujets, les
You
résolutions qui sont
remember
proposées
that there
aujourd'hui
were
en Assemblée générale.
some
On trouvait que c'était plus sympa
resolutions
en
which
termes
were
de
proposed during
présentation,
our
à partir
previous
du moment où
annual
on était sur
general
une thématique,
meetings,
d'arriver sur la
and
thématique
we'll be talking about
en
those too.
abordant les résolutions qui sont liées à cette
Uh,
thématique.
when we deal with the
Ensuite, ce que vous
resolutions
attendez tous
connected to those
justement,
themes.
donc ça sera
And
la
then what you've
présentation
all
des
been
4
waiting
innovations qui seront
for
présentées
is the presentation of the
durant cette
4
assemblée
new
générale pour
innovations
investissement.
that we would
On
like to
aura ensuite la
invest in.
présentation des rapports du commissaire
And
aux
then
comptes,
we
donc
have
Damien
the
Verpillier, qui est
reports
présent en
of our
distanciel.
financial
Il nous fera un petit
auditor,
coucou justement en
who is
visioconférence. Ça nous
online.
expliquera
He'll
c'est
say
quoi ces
hello to
rapports,
us
à quoi ça
online
sert
when
et
he comments
lui,
his
ce qu'il
report
a audité de son
and
point de vue
tell
extérieur.
us why he's saying what he's saying. Of course, we have a question and answer session, and then after that, we will proceed to the voting session. And without waiting for the voting session, you can already vote online if you so desire. And we're going to have that particular session at the end of the meeting. So I think it's good program. That's all there is. So let's proceed now to appointing the chairman of the meeting. And as Mehdi was so good at telling jokes just now, I suggest that we appoint him chairman of the meeting. And I confirm that I am the general manager of Team for the Planet. Can we see you, perhaps? Yeah, thank you for coming over. So now the people who are on the video conference can see you. So thank you for being chairman. We also need a secretary for the meeting. I could do it. I know, Denis, that's not your favorite thing. So I will be the secretary. And we need 2 scrutineers. And that's any shareholder of the association who is present and who would be good enough to take on this role. So we have Alain and Yannick who have volunteered to be scrutineers, and their role is to verify, make sure everything works well. Alain Meunier and Yannick Chamy, who is also a member of the Board of Surveillance, and their role is to make sure that we do indeed have a quorum and that we follow the agenda and we respect the general rules. Thanks for those appointments, nominations. Next slide, please. So let's verify that we do indeed have a quorum. Alain, Yannick, could you have seen that you can have a look at the computer and you have access to the voting system, so you will be able to make sure that we have reached the quorum in terms of the number of people who are present at the meeting in the room. That's why we identified you all as you came into the room, to make sure that we respect the rules for a general meeting. And this is an extraordinary meeting, so we need 25% of shareholders who are present. So could you tell us what percentage we have reached? 1846. So we have a positive, favorable vote for Time for the Planet. So thank you very much. So that means you haven't come for nothing, because, if we hadn't reached the quorum, we wouldn't have been able to proceed. So thanks to that system, we can continue with our general meeting. So we also need to make sure that our auditor is present. So as I said, he's online this evening, and he will be appearing a little later on to comment on his reports. And you are all able to vote. You've all received an email about 2 weeks ago with a link which is called Connect, and this allows you to access the voting place. So you will see that there's a button which says Vote Remotely, and all you have to do is click on that, and if you have any questions, you also are able to ask those questions online. Should you have any technical problems, here is the place to go. Emily is here. She's actually present this evening, so you can go and talk to her or send her an email should you have any technical problem or you need a little bit of help. So that's the protocol, the legal requirements for the meeting. So we're all good. And now we are going to proceed. Well, we've read the agenda. It's a little bit painstaking, as I said. Reading reports the same. We're going according to the case, what we normally do is the shareholders, the partners, if they find something that they really want to communicate, well, then they will read it. But if there is one person present who asks us to read the reports, well, then we have to do it. So, are we okay? Well, thanks for not making us read all the reports. So, now, Mehdi, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us everything that happened in 2022. So, here's a screen which will show you. Let's switch. So, the activity is a document of 120 pages, which I can't see. Which I'm sure you've all read in great detail. It's the first time that we produce an activity report. But there are people who say that video is great, but we prefer something to read. But as we were so happy, we'll be sure that you see it. So we're not going to be able to tell you about this. We have selected a fefew passages.
Parmi les plus importants pour cette année. Donc, ça va vraiment, on va essayer de parler un peu de tout, c'est-à-dire à la fois de la sélection des innovations.
So we're going to talk about the innovations that we've chosen and how we have collected new funds.
Donc, déjà,
so, Denis, could you tell us or comment the figures for 2022?
Oui, que sur l'année 2022, et tu l'as dit, il y a un rôle important chez Team for the Planet. Pour moi, c'est le rôle d'évaluatrice et évaluateur.
So the role of the assessor, which assesses the projects that we're going to be able to invest in, the innovations which have already been voted. There are about 700 people concerned here. And there are about 7,000 people who have volunteered for Time for the Project, and it's very important for us. And it's very important that this figure continues to increase, because everybody's going to participate according to the time they have available, but we need your point of view for all of the innovations, and this collective intelligence means that our evaluations are good ones. So, some people are familiar with the subject, concerned by the innovations, and some less so, but we need people, we need a good choice, experts and people who are less experts, and we need a lot of people to be sure that our assessments are really effective. And so we have about 11,000 assessments, 1,000 questions were asked, so you can see that that's pretty good. So our community is really, really active. So even at the moment, it's a bit artificial. We are nonetheless convinced that this is the right way of working. And we've learned a lot of things. The questions that the assessors ask are really precious for assessing the value of the innovations from a scientific point of view. So if you want to be an assessor, then you will receive a little bit of training over a month and a half, and the next training course takes place from the 15th of May. So in this report, we also shared the difficulties that we encountered and the points where we've learned a lot. And one of the main things we learned is that with all the assessment processes, all the elements which allow us to use collective intelligence, and in relation to investment funds, then, sometimes people, overtake us. And we no longer have any priority for a given project. And this is a problem. It could be a problem. And we noticed that at the end of this year, 2023, we're going to rethink our
Donc ça, on vous en
system
parlera, mais
to
ce rapport
make it a
fera
little
purement
bit more
numérique,
effective,
pas besoin de-
and we will be talking to you about that a
On a
little
aussi
later on.
vu que même si
And we
des
also
innovations
saw
peuvent arriver
that
jusqu'en Assemblée
even
générale,
if
ça ne veut pas forcément dire
there are
qu'on va
lots
réellement
of
investir.
different
Tout simplement parce que l'Assemblée générale nous donne
innovations,
l'autorisation d'investir.
we're not necessarily going to be able to invest. When we go into detail,
L'adage,
you know how it works, right?
Ça va pas le faire avec telle équipe. Ça va pas le
That
faire, parce
sometimes
qu'il y a
we
une problématique
find that the
juridique,
innovation
chiffre,
is worthy of invested in, but not with the team who has presented it. Sometimes the team needs to be changed.
Et donc dans ces cas-là, on arrête.
And so in that case, what do we do?
Notamment avec CIA qui a été voté à la dernière.
It happened with the CEA, the Atomic Commission, and Aridox also. At their annual general meeting, which took place some time ago, there were a lot of things that we needed to talk about and things that we needed to change. And we also realized that in Team for the Planet, sometimes there are innovations which volunteer, and we have to decide on an order of priority according to the scientific value of their project. So sometimes we can have too many things to assess. And sometimes it's rather difficult for us to carry out a real exhaustive assessment. So we try our very, very best to plan in advance, so we don't have too many projects to assess at the same time.
On a le sujet du co-investissement.
And then we have to talk about co-investment. Does Team for the Planet desire to co-invest with other bodies? Well, for the moment, because they are elements in co-investment which are a little bit complicated, we think that we are going to work with big corporations, but when there are several players from the economic world, things get complicated. From a financial point of view, but we have lots of different arguments when we are asked to work with big corporations in a co-investment project. But for the moment, it hasn't happened, but it could do. As we get bigger and as our competitive advantages increase, it is a point which would make co-investing with us even more attractive. And any specific clauses for our investments? How can we guarantee that what we invest in is actually going to take place? And that's something that we need to talk about, this notion of innovating, of being a majority shareholder in the structure. And we have broadened the scope, in fact, because there are some projects which are more advanced than others, and some companies which have already certain value on the market. So that was the case originally with Beyond the Sea when we first started investing in that company. So we had to find different tools to be sure that we were working in the right degree of logic. We had a partnership agreement, and in this agreement we have specific clauses to make sure that we are going to be a majority shareholders, at least in the field where this is important to us. So the elements of these clauses, when we are not majority shareholders, need to be clearly defined in the partnership agreement. And this allows us to decide when we want to advance, and a partnership agreement sometimes is so detailed, that we find it a little bit too detailed. If we're not satisfied with the partners that we're working with, we need to be sure that we have the possibility of changing various situations.
Et maintenant, on va vous donner des nouvelles
And now
fraîches,
we're going
en
to
direct,
give you
de la
some
part de
fresh
certaines de nos innovations. On va
news.
pouvoir balayer tout simplement parce qu'on n'a pas le temps de tout voir et que
Alors,
tout
we
ça,
can't see, we can't have a look at
c'est
everything.
événement désormais.
So
Et donc,
every time we
Denis,
have an
est-ce que tu peux nous
event,
parler
we have a
de Beyond the
highlight.
Sea et mettre les gens
So
à
can you
l'écoute?
talk about Beyond the Sea,
Oui, bah,
Denis?
dans les grandes avancées
In
2022,
the
je
major
vais prendre
advances
les
in
retours. Il y a
2022,
eu une évolution très
there has
marquée
been
au moment où on
a
a trouvé le
big
profil
change
CEO, le poste entrepreneur
as we
expérimenté
found
pour
when we
venir
found the right
faire un
CEO
duo avec Yves Parlier qui était le
to
porteur de
work
projet et
with
l'innovateur
Yves
de cette
Parlier, who
solution.
was
Beyond the
the
Sea, pour rappel, ce sont des
project
systèmes
leader.
de kite, des voiles de kite
So
qu'on
these
vient
are
ajouter à
kite systems
navires
that
pour
we've
pouvoir traquer
added
les bateaux et baisser
to
leurs besoins en consommation.
um,
Ça permet
large
en moyenne
ships,
une
and
réduction
so
de
that we can
30% de la
reduce
consommation des
their
navires, donc de toute la flotte
fuel
maritime.
consumption
Finalement,
by
ça
about
s'adapte sur n'importe quel type de bateau.
20%. And
Et
that
donc,
can
on
be
peut baisser
adapted to
finalement de
any
20% l'empreinte
kind
carbone
of
de tout le
ship,
secteur maritime avec
and
cette
so we
solution.
can lower the
C'est ce qui nous
carbon
a intéressé.
footprint by
Yves Parlier,
20%. What was
c'est un célèbre
interesting
navigateur
was that
français qui a fait plusieurs
Yves
Vendée Globe, qui a
Parlier
gagné
is
plusieurs
very
courses.
famous
Et
as a
lui, il a
French
ce côté
navigator. He
ingénieur, il
won
a
the
ce
Vendée
côté
Globe. He's an
marin,
engineer.
il a pu
He's a
trouver cette
sailor.
solution-là et la
And he was
développer
able
pour
to
qu'elle soit
find a
pertinente.
solution
Maintenant, c'est pas un
for it to be
entrepreneur
relevant. And now he's an
c'est pas un
entrepreneur.
manager, c'est pas un
He's not a
business man.
manager
Et
per
donc, du coup,
se.
ça a
He's
été
not a
intéressant de
businessman.
rajouter un profil
So
qu'on a
it was
trouvé qui
good
s'appelle
to
Marc
find
Lebron,
another
qui a
profile,
rejoint la structure en
Mark
septembre
Champion, who
2022. Et
joined
Marc
us
a une
in
expérience,
September
lui, et une
22.
expertise
And
sur tout le
Mark
secteur maritime, le
has
besoin des
experience and
armateurs, etc.
expertise
Et
in
le
shipping.
duo a mis du
So
temps à se trouver, parce
this
qu'il a fallu définir un
duo,
profil idéal. Et donc
this
ça, c'est un élément
tandem,
essentiel, c'est qu'il faut
was
qu'il y ait un
something
matching humain
they needed
vraiment fort entre les
to
deux personnes.
take time to
Et
match
on
on
est
a
plutôt
human
content du
level.
résultat aujourd'hui, puisque vraiment ça
And
a permis
given the results
d'accélérer le
today,
développement de la
this
structure, de la
has allowed us to
professionnaliser. On passe de
accelerate
profils plutôt
the structure
stagiaires
to
à
become
plusieurs
more
profils aussi
professional. We
post-CDI.
had
On a
interns, we
staffé
now have
différemment l'équipe.
permanent
Et
staff,
surtout,
and
l'ensemble des développements qui ont été
we
traités
all
avec
of the
jusque-là
developments
sont
that
passés en
we dealt
pratique,
with
puisque
have now become
l'arrivée de Marc a été
practices,
synonyme de la mise à
because
l'eau
Mark
d'un
meant
démonstrateur, le premier
we were
démonstrateur,
able to
pour
have
faire
a
les tests en grandeur
demonstrator
réelle
in the
de la
sea
solution
and
du Sea
do
Kite. Et donc cette voile avec un
full
pilotage automatique.
size
Donc la théorie c'est bien beau, maintenant quand on met en pratique c'est une vraie phase d'évolution dans un projet
full
d'innovation.
size craft.
Jusque
So
là,
now we can show
l'anecdote
how
c'est quand
it
on a
works.
investi en fait
And
en
when we
janvier,
invested
Yves nous
to
disait
begin
tous les
with in
jours
January,
ce
Eve
mois
was
suivant
saying every
ça
day,
sera à l'eau. Le mois suivant,
well,
donc janvier, février, en
it'll
mars ce
be
sera en
in the
avril,
water
en
soon.
mai on
In
arrive
March
à
it'll be,
l'été, en septembre,
and
et en fait du
finally
moment que Marc est
May,
arrivé,
the
il
summer,
m'a dit Marc,
September.
là ça commence à faire
Finally,
beaucoup,
Mark
est-ce que
said,
tu
"Wait
peux
a
être
minute.
sûr que le mois prochain,
Can you make
vraiment
sure that
le
next month
démonstrateur sera à l'eau?"
we
Et
can
en effet, il a
get
fait le point
into
avec
the
les
sea?"
équipes, il a dit bon bah,
And
il
he
coulera
talked to
ou
the
pas, mais
teams.
on le met à l'eau à
He
cette
says,
date-là. Heureusement, il n'a
"It
pas
may
coulé.
sink, but we'll
Mais du
do
coup,
it."
on a pu avoir le démonstrateur,
And
il y a
we were
beaucoup
able
d'essais
to
qui
have
sont
the
faits,
demonstrator,
ça permet de tester les
and
voiles,
that
différentes tailles,
allowed
25,
us
50
to
mètres carrés. Et du coup, c'est
test
très intéressant
different
parce que ça permet de
sizes of
concrétiser et
sails,
d'avancer
25,
réellement
50
la
square
phase
meters,
de développement.
and that means we
On
really
verra un
can
peu
move
plus loin, là, vous avez
forward.
une image. Un peu
Further
plus
on,
tard,
you
pendant
have
que
an
les votes
image.
moulineront, on vous montrera
While
une petite vidéo pour
we
que vous voyez en action
vote,
ce kite.
you'll see a video to
Ok,
see this kite
merci
working.
beaucoup. Alors maintenant,
Thank
sans nous
you.
mettre un coup de frein, parlons
Now,
quand même de
without,
l'éclatant Dynamics.
let's
Voilà,
talk
c'est donc,
about
vous avez compris
Navix. Without
le jeu et la qualité
us
humoristique
being
de Mehdi.
the
Donc
cold
du coup, les
shower,
Dynamics,
it's
première chose, sachez qu'ils sont
quite funny,
exposants
really.
au mix
In fact,
ici. Donc ceux
these
que vous avez pu le voir peut-être
Leviathan
aujourd'hui, vous pourrez les voir demain
Dynamics
si
are
vous voulez également, si vous voulez creuser le
have a
sujet et discuter
stand here
directement
if you want
avec
to
Naoufel
talk to
et Alan
them
qui doivent être
with
également
Naifel and
dans la
Alan,
salle.
who are
Naoufel,
in the
Alan,
room.
si vous pouvez vous
And if you
noter,
could
voilà, qui
just
sont là. Et alors Alan
raise your
va
hand,
devoir rentrer sur
Alan
Paris,
will
mais je crois
have
que Naoufel
to go
nous fera
back
plaisir
to
de rester avec nous
Paris,
après.
but
Donc si vous
Naifel
voulez
will
échanger aussi
stay.
avec
If you want to
Naoufel,
talk to him,
il sera disponible.
he'll be
Pour revenir
available.
sur le projet, on est sur
Now,
un
to come
système
back to the
pour faire
project,
très
we're
simple
talking
de
about a system
climatisation sans gaz
where
fluoré.
we
Ces
have
gaz qui ont un énorme pouvoir de
air
réchauffement climatique,
conditioning
la
without
combustion est supérieure au
fluorescent
CO2.
gas,
Et
or
du coup,
fluor gas,
Alan
sorry,
et
and
Carino, les deux
Alan
inventeurs de cette
and
solution-là,
Anna
ont
Carino
imaginé une solution
have
qui permet de
thought
s'affranchir de ces gaz
come
fluorés
up
et
with a
d'utiliser simplement
solution,
l'eau comme un
which means that
réfrigérant.
we use
Donc c'est une vraie
simply
innovation
water
disruptive qui demande du
and not
développement
this gas.
et
It's a
qui va demander
non-destructive
également un profil plus
invention
expérimenté, un
which
profil
need
plus
which
entrepreneur,
needs
un profil
time.
plus business
We have to
pour
have a
arriver à
entrepreneurial
concrétiser
profile
en
to
innovation qui trouve son
actually
marché.
make
Et donc
this
quand on a
innovation
investi
work and
dans
find a
l'équipe et
market.
dans
So when we
l'innovation
invested invested
on l'a fait en
in
deux
the
temps.
team and
Dans un
in the
premier
innovation.
temps, donc ça,
It
c'était
was in
fin
two
2021,
phases.
on a investi
At
en
the
premier
end
ticket de
of
350 000 €
21,
pour
we
tester
put
un petit peu la solution
350,000 euros to
et
test the
vérifier qu'il y a bien une
solution
appétence du marché.
and
C'était un
make
doute qu'on
sure
avait
that
encore,
there
on avait
was a
confiance en
market.
l'équipe
We had
technique,
some
mais
doubt.
on avait des doutes sur
We
la
were
partie
confident
commerciale.
in the technical
Entre-temps,
side of
on a
things,
trouvé le
but not
profil de
the
Naofel,
sales side.
qui
So
a été
then we
validé
had
par Caroline
Neofel,
Laval. Il a rejoint
who
l'équipe et l'objectif
he
c'était
was validated by
vous
Caroline,
développer
and
et
this was
vendez
validated to sell the first 4 pilot projects to show us that you could develop the technology and that people are ready to pay for this technology. It took us some months to do that, and 6 months later, we were at our target, and we went to 1.5 million for pre-industrialization. So it was a big step forward, and we sold our first pilot machines. Some of it has been installed, and the rest is now being designed. And so Beyond the Sea, like Beyond the Sea, it's an essential phase with feedback from the field and to show that we have a viable and reliable solution. So we're in that phase now before we actually ramp up to industrialization. So now that was done in 2022, there's a great shot of the team. So since you've now warmed up, maybe you can continue. No, I've been told I have to move on more quickly. Can you talk about Cool Roof, please? Now it's really putting me under pressure here. No, Cool Roof, it's a very simple solution. It's not a breakthrough. It's simply white paint on a roof to reduce the need for air conditioning, but in fact it's technically been formulated for it not to be a polluting factor. There's no it's not degraded because of UVs. This paint can last for up to 20 years and will therefore reflect the heat so that it doesn't heat the building. It's very easy to apply, and for a Cool Roof we invested in the middle of 2022. We developed quite well. The product was there, and meanwhile, in the meantime, the company doubled its sales, in particular with a lot of work by Julien, who was the MD, and was chosen. He was already identified by the founders as right for the job. We doubled our business, 172,000 square meters painted in 2022, and now we project forward to continue this growth and to double once more the figure in 2023. We're not going to talk about Shiva because we'll talk about it a lot more later, so we'll keep the suspense for now. We have Carbon time. Just maybe talk about it for 1 minute. And then you can rest. No, you improvise even beyond those that are in the report. Carbon time was the first innovation. It was not to reduce, but capture CO2 and gashouse gases and greenhouse gases. And there's olivine used where there's a reaction with water, which allows you to capture the CO2. What's interesting with this solution is that it's not a technological solution per se, but this accelerated a natural function and which can last for a long time and really stock it for thousands of years. In 2022, we worked with Antwerp University, which is specifically, we worked on olivine for several years, has a lot of experience, and had mesocasts, which are small pools where they do trials in different conditions. And there was a collaboration during 2022, allows us to increase our knowledge so that tomorrow we can use this in pilot sites. First, we went from the lab to the pilot stage, and now the objective, we've got beyond the university, is to go to the next phase on pilot stages, and that's the objective in 2023. I recommend that you visit this because it's really a worthwhile project. Now we're looking at that we've moved forward considerably in the number of subscribers. The first thing is that the number we communicate a lot about the 100,000 shareholders. It's not something that we just do metrics so we look good. It's fundamental. That's why it's now called Team for the Planet, because the network of shareholders is a huge leverage for us to accelerate our activity. We see a huge increase. We went from 28,000 new shareholders to 68,000 next year, and half during the week of our promotion. The amount isn't huge because there are two phenomena. The first is that since we look at shareholders that are much wider, there's a lot of small sums that come in. I convinced my grandmother to put 10 euros in. That gives us a new shareholder. That doesn't make it, that doesn't account for huge amounts. But what's really interesting is that the work we do on the major investors for hundreds of thousands or millions, that's starting to pay off now. We have new people who have come in, people from London who are specialists in raising funds. It takes a lot of time, but it's paying off right now. And what's important is that when we went to raise these funds, we've learned a lot of things. And with some investors, it takes less time than for others. And let me give you an image here. This is the target of big companies. They're interested. We met CAC 40 directors, including the executive committees, and we didn't need to reach out to them because they're already shareholders. But for a big company to invest, you have to coordinate a lot of people to agree, and you have to find slots, investment slots that are new. And one is the climate dividend. It's not a compensation tool. They can't use that, the companies, but it's a way of showing that you are contributing to decarbonization. And that's really interesting for companies. It takes time. Because the climate dividend has to be recognized by international bodies, but it takes time. So meanwhile, we have other targets for big investors, often heads of family business who have to invest in terms of the amount and the speed at which they invest. So we're quite confident that we'll be able to increase our fundraising, and I'll skip the other elements. This is for Laurent. Here you have Laurent Burel that we took a few months ago after he got officialization from the market control authorities in France. So this market control authority in France means that when you want to increase your assets, your capital assets, and you call upon public savings, this is highly regulated by this body in France. And when we go beyond 8 million euros on a sliding yearly basis, we have to go into a very complex procedure compared to what we had to do before, which means we have to present a very complex financial document to allow them, the authorities, to understand how we control the funds, who has access to the bank accounts, the codes. There's a lot of technical issues, and I won't go into detail, but also to understand there are no financial dividends. So that's a bit of a cultural shock for them, because generally people who invest will give an ROI of 10%, 5, whatever, and we say no. What we do, we give them a different type of dividend which they don't understand, and these are climate dividends, and how this works on a day-to-day basis. It took a lot of time to explain this to them, and so we're able to increase our capital holdings, and to raise millions of euros, which means we should be at $1 billion in 2 or 3 months. Is that the prediction? That's what Emma said. So it's confirmed. Thank you.
Sachant qu'à l'AMF, on nous avait dit
So
qu'on était, je
the
crois, un des
French
sujets
Control
d'appel
Authority, the
sensibles, parce qu'il reçoit
AMF,
des appels pour
said
savoir est-ce
that
que
they
c'est
were
safe ou pas
one of the
d'investir
main topics that people are interested in. They're getting a lot of calls,
Il y a plein de gens qui se
and it's a
demandaient
real
si c'était
subject. A lot of people are
dangereux ou pas
asking
d'investir chez Team for the
whether
Planet,
it
surtout au
was
départ.
dangerous
Ça nous aide aussi
to
en termes de crédibilité.
invest in
Alors,
Team for the Planet. So
maintenant,
it
on va
gives
vous
us
parler de l'accompagnement
credibility.
des étoiles.
So
Donc, les
now
étoiles
we're
étant
going to
les
talk about
entreprises dans lesquelles on a investi,
the way that we back star companies. These are people that have been pointed out as exceptional by the assessors. So what's important for us, for our investment fund, we bring money in, and the people who have organized the company wanted to reinvent this whole process. We don't want the stars to think that they're at our service for Team for the Planet. We want them to feel that we, all of us, are serving them, because they're the ones who do the work, and we wanted to contribute as much as possible. You have to get to know people. That's what we do. We meet people on site. We don't just want to know the company directors. We want to meet the people who are working on an everyday basis, people in R&D, accounting, everything. So the other thing is that we want to give them free services. These services have been really made into things that are tangible. We see here things, how we work with the scientific and supervisory boards. What we did, we presented a list of things we want to do. There are things that are obvious: financing, obviously, funding. There's nothing original about that. The second thing is customers. A lot of funds promise us to recruit that, but we can do more. But we're not going through the managers. No, it's 110,000 people. It could be SME, a local SME, or the executive committee of a big company. And that allows our stars to reach out. And we were talking about the White Roof, and 1/3 of its pipeline of the companies that they are talking to came from Team for the Planet, for the incoming bids, quotes. So, and talent now. These are people that we call these people talents that we're recruiting. And we have the head of talent now. That's the new name for this section. It's fundamental. It seems counterintuitive. It's more difficult to find technical people. That's something we can bring to the table as well, to have a job board, which is a bulletin board where people find profiles that are very hard to find, and the fact that there's a lot of notoriety, and that we have a lot of impact, and we're being talked about. And we have someone now who has come in, Capucine, who is a specialist in recruitment. CEOs. This means that when an innovation comes our way, we don't have to have a complete match between a team, a market, and a technology. We know we can rethink our teams with our innovations. That changes everything. We talked about that. The fact that you can
d'apporter une
redesign
compétence
a team
de
and bring a new
démarche,
level
de
of
connexion,
expertise
de
into a
compréhension de
network,
comment on passe une technologie
and
à un produit
how
qui
we
est
go from a
le
technology
principal
to a
problème
product,
dans le monde
which is the
industriel.
biggest problem
Tout
in the
ça, ça change
industrial
tout.
world.
La
All of that
notoriété,
is a real a
le fait qu'on
change
soit en
in
permanence en train de poser des
process.
étoiles de
The
partout,
fact
que
that
vous soyez en
we're
permanence en train d'en
our
parler,
notoriety,
le fait que la
the
marque
fact that
Team for the
we're
Planet soit de plus en plus connue,
recognized, that the
bah, ça change que quand
brand Team
on
for
la
the
pose
Planet
quelque part,
is
il y a une
incredibly
confiance
is growing
d'identification
in
qui se crée
terms of
et qui
people's awareness,
pousse
and that
l'innovation encore plus loin.
pushes innovation
Et puis
even
alors, ça c'est un peu
further,
plus
and that's
accessoire,
what
mais on
we're
aide
known
aussi à
for.
la communication et au design.
And
Donc
so
ça,
we have
c'est quelque
worked a
chose qu'on a
lot on
vraiment
communication and design.
découvert
So
et
that's something we
pas encore
discovered,
organisé, mais plutôt
not
poussé
fully
au maximum
organized yet, which we've
de façon
really
artisanale
tried to move
l'année
forward
dernière. Et
for
maintenant,
us to
en
stay
2023, on a
really
annoncé un petit
in a
peu notre
craft
vision.
mode.
On va le
So
rendre
we
plus
want it to be,
scalable, c'est-à-dire
want to
on va faire en sorte que
upscale,
ça soit quelque chose qui puisse
and that
être
it's
généralisé
also
et ne plus forcément passer
scalable
entièrement
and
par l'équipe
not
permanente.
necessarily go through the
Euh,
permanent team. So
donc
in other
ça,
words, to have
c'est
various
les
outlets.
licences libres. Donc les
Now,
licences libres,
free
c'est le terme qu'on a
licenses,
utilisé pour
that's the
désigner la
term
façon
we're
dont on
using
veut
to
s'inspirer
designate
de
the
l'open source
way
pour permettre aux
we want to
innovations
be
de se
inspired
déployer.
from open source to
Ça veut dire
deploy
qu'il y
our
a un brevet qui doit être
innovations.
fait quand c'est possible et
So
qu'il
if there's a
va y
patent
avoir un
that's
contrat qui va être passé entre
set
l'étoile
when it's
et ceux
possible,
qui veulent
and then
utiliser la
we'll
technologie
have
d'innovation. Ce
a
contrat
contract
comprendra
between the star
des
and
droits
those
et
who want
devoirs.
to use the
Et
technology.
donc
This will
là,
have
cette année,
rights
notre but, c'est de
and
pouvoir commencer
responsibilities.
à
So
imaginer
what we want to
cette
do is to
licence libre et
think
aller vers la
about
mise en place
these
concrète
free
avec plusieurs de nos
licenses and
étoiles
implement
pour
those
pour
with
qu'on puisse
several
rentrer dans le
stars
réel
so
avec
that
cette
we
idée
go
qui peut vraiment
into the
changer la
real
donne sur la
world
façon dont on diffuse
with this
ces fameuses
idea that
innovations.
we
Parce que
can
si on investit tout ce
disseminate
temps
these
et tout cet argent
innovations,
juste pour qu'il
because
y ait une équipe
if
dans
we
un coin
invest
du
all this
globe qui
time and
puisse
money for
déployer
one
l'innovation,
team
on sera passé à côté. Donc il faut
somewhere
aller
on
beaucoup
the
plus loin
on
et il faut
earth
rendre cette innovation
doing something, we have to go much
disponible
further,
et qu'elle puisse
and
se
we have
déployer.
to make this information
Le dividende climat, je
available
n'en dis pas
throughout
grand-chose
the
parce que
world.
je n'ai plus le temps et
For
que tout est dans le
climate
rapport.
change is
Mais
something I can't talk
sachez
about
qu'on a
because we don't have
quand même
enough
acté
time,
la
but
création d'une
we have
association indépendante
decided to have
qui
an
maintenant porte le
independent
dividende climat
association
de façon autonome et
which
donc ce
now
n'est plus Team
has
for the Planet
the
qui
climate
possède
dividend
le dividende climat.
that
Le compteur carbone,
is
la jauge carbone, la fameuse jauge
disseminating this
carbone qui a
independently. So
été
it's not
dévoilée à
just
l'issue de
us.
l'opération des 100 000,
The
ça
carbon
c'est la
meter
mise en ligne
is
en fait de
something
notre
that was put online
résultat, le résultat de toutes
to
nos actions.
talk about
C'est
the
quelque chose qui est
results
forcément
we've
exponentiel.
achieved. Now that's
Déjà parce que
obviously
là, par exemple, pour
exponential
l'instant, il n'y a
because
que
right
deux
now
de nos
we
innovations
just
qui
have
génèrent
two
déjà
of
du
our
dividende climat. Les autres
innovations
ne sont pas encore
that are
commercialisés. Donc là, pour l'instant, il n'y a que les étoiles
widespread. The
Dynamics
others have
qui
not
sont au
been
stade de la
put
commercialisation.
into a
La
commercial
deuxième chose, c'est que
have gone
ces
into a
innovations-là,
commercial
elles se
stage,
déploient de
which
plus en
means
plus vite.
these
C'est-à-dire que chaque
innovations
année,
are
elles
being
vont,
deployed
comme elles
increasingly
vendent plus
quickly.
de leurs produits et que chaque fois que leur
So
produit est installé,
every
ça
time
diminue
that
les
a
émissions de
product
CO2,
is arrived,
ça va être de
is
plus en plus fort. Et en
installed,
plus de ça, après, il y
there'll
aura
be
l'effet
an
licence libre.
exponential process,
Donc,
and
on
then
l'a mis en
there'll
place
be
et
the
le
licenses.
but, c'est
So
que vous puissiez
this
le voir
meter
en live,
here,
hein, ce
you can
sera
see in
activé
real
d'ici quelques
time
mois,
in a
où
couple of
vous verrez
months
les kilos de CO2
the
défiler.
kilos of
réduits.
CO2, the tons of CO2 that
Donc
we
là, vous
have
voyez le détail entre comment on
eliminated,
fait Léviathan et Dynamics. On a fait notre propre bilan carbone parce que souvent on nous pose la
so-called roof,
question et
and
c'est vrai que là c'est important de remettre
for
les ordres de
example,
grandeur hein,
and
parce
our
qu'on a déjà eu la
carbon
remarque. Oui, mais bon, ok, c'est super les
carbon
innovations, mais votre site
achievements
internet, il y a des images qui ne sont pas
something that
optimisées,
we can
donc
show
ça annule
concretely.
les effets
So
de votre action.
if we
Donc là, on
can't
voit que
show
dès
what
la
we're
toute
doing,
première année, hein, on est à des
then
années-lumière entre
it
l'impact
won't
du
have any
CO2
impact.
et notre
And
bilan
now,
carbone,
between
sachant que
the first
ce
year and
bilan est
today,
disponible et que vous verrez
the
du coup qu'il y a
carbon
beaucoup de choses qui sont
achievements
optimisées. Par exemple,
are
l'équipe
very,
est
very
quasiment
significant. Our
totalement
growth
végétarienne.
is
Et ça a un impact très important,
increased,
beaucoup plus important,
is
beaucoup plus
very
important que
impressive.
le site
For
internet.
example, the vegetarian
Ensuite,
aspects that has better impact than just our internet
ça,
site.
je vous le mentionne,
Our
il y a
internet
tout un
site.
passage sur la
There's
communauté, la culture de Team
there's
for the
something
Planet
about
que je vous conseille vraiment
the
parce que ça
culture
explique toute
of
notre
Team for the
démarche
Planet because it
sur comment
explains
est-ce qu'on met en
our
place
approach on
la
how
possibilité pour des actionnaires de
we
devenir actifs
implement
sans être maltraités ou maltraitants les uns vis-à-vis des autres.
the
Parce que c'est quelque chose qui peut
ability
arriver
for our
dans le monde du
shareholders to be
bénévolat.
really
On a
active
beaucoup
without
réfléchi à ça.
any
Nicolas
sort of
a
aggressivity
pensé
or
quelque chose
mistreatment. What we've
d'assez
tried
unique
to
en fait dans la
do
façon de
is to
l'organiser. Et donc
try
c'est intéressant
and find something unique in our organization.
à découvrir
It's
si vous ne connaissez pas du tout.
interesting to discover if you don't know anything about that. In terms of the circles of the community, it's important to see how people commit to Team for the Planet. There's a very ultra active community, a few hundred people, and some are always connected. Our interface, which is called Discord, where you can change. You just have to have a small training called Galaxy. We have people who are active, but not are constantly connected, but will do something for Team for the Planet. I'll be part of a task force. There'll be assessors. They'll create some content. And then we have the active ambassadors. What does that mean? That at some point, that person or these people have told someone about Team for the Planet, have or just on LinkedIn, means that they've tried to help to our knowledge about Team for the Planet. So we need to be recognized, and we need funds for innovation. Those are the two priorities. So that's a very important point. Arthur has a huge system to help Team for the Planet on the internet and on social networks, and that works really well for us to increase our presence throughout the world. So the things we achieved in 2022 on Galaxy with active and very active shareholders. I won't go into all the details with all the things we've succeeded at. I'd rather talk about the difficult things. There are really great moments that we experienced, but the difficulties we've had to deal with, we don't have an increase in the number of active people. And one of the main reasons for that is that we don't have enough in-house people. We have 10 people to maintain the relations, create events, to be present everywhere, to make sure new things are happening. So that's something we have to work on, and we'll talk about that in terms of the means, the resources we need. And the second thing, Cora, who talked about the Galaxy Action, wasn't there for several months, and that's explained in the report. We're being very transparent about this. You were saying? Okay. We had some difficulties, some fatigue, and we need to have more people in our team. We need to have a legible strategy, which is what we did by revealing our strategy in 2023. You should look at that. In the seasonal aspect of things, I won't talk about that. I'll go to communication with this particular piece. What's interesting is to see what works and what works less in our publications. Sometimes, well, it's just communication. Because people who don't know us really sees a lot of communication on the social networks without fresh news all the time from our stars. Because when we post on innovation, you can see we had 301 likes, that we had 700 assessors. We give some on our participation, we get 400, 500, 700 likes. But when we give the numbers about the number of shareholders, when we do a spoof on Black Friday, then we get a lot more likes, and that's what makes us visible. And so it's very to communicate on the really concrete bits. So we have to use both serious news about what we've done with and to show truly what we've been able to achieve. And it's unfortunately, communication is still too small. We had 10 people last year. we need to increase that number,
est normal parce que déjà
and that's
en
normal
fait,
because
elle est dimensionnée en fonction des fonds qu'on a levés.
it's
Donc, en
partly
2022, on était
due
plutôt
to
sur des
the
fonds levés en
funding we
2021.
had in
Il n'y a que
2022.
10%
We used the
du
2021
montant que
funds.
vous pouvez
Only
allouer
10%
à
could be
l'ensemble de vos dépenses.
allocated
Donc
to
là, ça
all
permet
of
de
our
venir
expenses,
corriger
and that
des
gets
dépenses
us to the
qui est
expenses section of
ici
our
dans
report,
le bilan financier.
which is in our
Donc,
financial
on
report.
vous invite vous allez
So
dans les
we,
résolutions, il y a des
you
résolutions
can
sur
go,
sur
there are
la partie financière.
resolutions on
Donc là,
the
Laurent, peut-être tu peux
financial parts, perhaps.
commenter un petit peu cette
Laurent,
partie financière.
Ouais,
you can
complètement.
comment that bit.
Donc la partie financière, donc vous avez effectivement
Absolutely.
les comptes annuels qui
You
vous
can
sont
see here that you have the annual
communiqués
accounts
régulièrement,
which are
qui
communicated to
sont aussi
you
enregistrés,
regularly,
ça se fait en direct.
and
Donc en fait,
I'd
ce
like
que
to
vous dites
comment them
sur l'année
because
2022,
over the
on
year
a dépensé
2022,
donc
we
en dépenses, en
spent
charges globales à peu près
in
1,5 million
global expenses about
d'euros. La
1.5
plupart
million
de ces
euros,
dépenses, donc on a
and most of this
43% qui sont de la masse
expense,
salariale.
43%
Salariale, c'est donc
is
les salaires
represented
des personnes qui
by
travaillent,
our
hein,
wages,
charges
people who
fixes.
work for us,
Et
and
vous avez donc
the
ensuite
charges which are
parmi toutes
associated
les
to
autres
salaries. And
qui
amongst the other
peuvent effectivement avoir.
expenses,
Donc là, vous avez la
we can
répartition,
see
à
here
savoir
the
qu'il
share.
y a effectivement à peu près 200 000 euros
We
en
have
fonction de
about
développement,
200,000
à la fois du
euros
développement outils web,
in
informatique. Et il faut savoir que pour
IT,
à la
web
fois gérer
development,
une
and we have
communauté,
to
gérer
manage
de nouveaux
a
associés qui
community
rejoignent,
of new
avoir
associates
un
who join
formulaire qui
us,
fonctionne pour un
and
paiement avec une signature
they
électronique
need to
ensuite, et que tout
have
ça fonctionne
effective
correctement,
ways
que
of
ce soit une
paying,
confirmation,
forms to
que tout
fill
soit
in,
bien
which
reçu
are
de
easy
bonne
to
base, et ainsi de suite. Donc
understand.
ça, c'est beaucoup
And
d'outils
all this
derrière
needs
qui travaillent. Donc c'est à la fois
means that we have a lot of different
outils
tools that we
pour
use,
des
and they
freelances, la
need to
moitié
be
qui coûtent 1 000
managed.
euros, un peu plus,
Some
c'est
of
justement
the
les
developers are
freelances, les
freelancers,
développeurs freelance, des
and
designers en
freelance
UX, en UI,
developers,
et notamment
designers,
ils nous permettent aussi de
UX
mettre à disposition l'espace
experts. And this
des
allows us
actionnaires
to have the shareholder
et qui va
space
être amené
that
aussi à
you will have
évoluer pour être beaucoup
access
plus
to.
riche
And
donc
it's
dans les
developed
prochains mois,
because it's
prochaines
far
années,
more complex, and
pour que
it
ce soit
will
beaucoup plus
continue to
complet, que ça
develop in
devienne
the
vraiment
coming
quelque chose de
months.
central pour
It
tous les
will be
actionnaires
more and more
de
complete,
Team
and
for the
it's
Planet.
going to be the very
Donc voilà,
basis
vous
of
pouvez retrouver tous les
every
détails ici.
Team for the Planet
Et donc
shareholder.
de
So
ce
I'd like
sujet
to
pour
take
nous amener donc
advantage
la
of being
première
here
résolution qui sera
to
soumise au vote tout à
talk to
l'heure. La
you
première
about
résolution,
the
ce sera le
first
plafonnement
resolution that you
des
will be
comptes
asked to
annuels
vote for,
et
the
donner quitus
approval
à la
of the
gérance. Donc
annual
l'approbation des
account,
comptes annuels, c'est
and
de
to give
valider
permission
effectivement simplement les
to
comptes
the
qui sont
GM to
établis
validate those
par l'expert
accounts,
comptable, qui
which
sont
have
ensuite
been, of
audités
course,
par notre
drawn up
commissaire aux
by
comptes
our
qui vous
auditor,
parlera aussi de
by
ce
our
rapport.
accountant, and audited by our
On
financial
a
accountant.
effectivement également donc, le quitus
And
à la gérance qui est donné.
we
Le
would
quitus à la
like
gérance,
you
c'est
to
est-ce que les estimés
approve
sur 2022,
the
les dirigeants
management
de la
report
société ont bien
and
dirigé la société par rapport à la
to
mission
say
qui a été
that
développée,
you continue to
par rapport notamment
approve them
à la mission et l'objet social
remaining
de la
in their
société.
current
Et donc c'est
role,
ça en fait, c'est oui, je fais confiance à ces
insofar
gens-là pour
as
continuer
you're saying
à diriger
basically
la
that you
société
trust these
par la suite.
people
Donc voilà la
to
résolution
manage
pour
the
laquelle on
company.
vous proposera nous de voter
And
pour.
we're
Et
going
bien sûr, à
to
chaque résolution,
propose,
voter contre ou vous abstenir. Il y aura
we're
un
going to
vote
suggest
à la
that
fin
you vote
pour
for or
voter sur
against
toutes les
each
résolutions
different
si
resolution.
vous n'avez pas déjà
During the
voté
course
au
of the
préalable.
evening, you'll be able to do so if you haven't
J'en
already
profite également
voted.
enchaîner sur
So
la résolution
I'd
numéro 2 qui
also
va être sur
like to
l'attribution du
go
résultat. On arrive
on
sur un résultat
to
comptable de
resolution number
2
2.
300
So
000.
the results of our
On a
account
effectivement
is
quelques
minus
chiffres d'affaires, on va dire. On a notamment
1,305,000
des
euros.
entreprises qui ne peuvent pas devenir
So we
actionnaires parce
do
que c'est
have
trop compliqué
companies
pour elles d'un
which
point de vue
can't become
juridique,
shareholders because
réglementaire, et
it's
donc
too
qui
complicated from a
sponsors
legal
en
point of
fait
view. So instead of being shareholders, they are
et on a
sponsors
également la vente de
of
livres, effectivement, de livres qui se
TFTP.
vendent, plus effectivement
And
quelques
the
facturations
Banque
de
Populaire,
frais
for
qu'on a des
example,
fois de frais
plays an
d'impôt
important role
qu'on
in
refacture
this
par exemple aux États, etc.
because sometimes we are
Qu'il faut effectivement qu'on dépense
rebilling
effectivement sur les
expenses,
factures juridiques.
and we
Donc,
have
ce qui fait
to
qu'on
be
a
sure
une
that we do this
déficitaire numéro
correctly,
3,
respecting the
qui
legal
est
status
pas un souci
of
d'avoir une
the
trésorerie,
people
au
we're
sens
dealing
où on
with.
lève des fonds et ces fonds
So
qui sont
we
levés, c'est
are
pas
raising
c'est
funds,
du
and
capital,
these
dans le sens où
funds
ça
are
permet
not
justement de
included in our
financer
sales
le
figures,
Il faut savoir
even
qu'il
if
faut
it is money which
systématiquement
allows us to
affecter ce
finance the
résultat quand
projects.
il est
And
déficitaire, ce
what do we
résultat,
do
comptablement,
then
il faut
with the
toujours
result of
en
our
réserve,
financial year? We have to
réserve, pardon, en dette
decide
nouveau, en report à nouveau.
what we are going
Et donc en fait, on
to
vous
do
propose tout
with
simplement
the
d'affecter
result. And
en report
what
à
we do
nouveau, ce qui
suggest
se fait de manière
is that we
extrêmement
put
classique d'un
it
point de vue
back
comptable.
into
Donc
the
là, c'est
company.
très
It's a classic
comptable,
form of
mais
doing things
sans
from an
enjeu
accounting point of point of view. So, just basically, we suggest that we put the money back into the company. The third resolution I'm going to hand over here. But what about the resolutions which concern our supervisory board? So these are the members 22 of them who were on the board. And this is a mandate of 3 years. After 3 years, it's the end of the mandate. And this is the case for the mandate of Pauline, who was member of the supervisory board, and her mandate is now over, and she decided not to renew her role. She doesn't really have time at the moment to do that. So we are going to ask you to note that her mandate is now over. Resolution number 9, it's the same thing for Pascal Ostachi, who was president of the supervisory board from the Annika company. His mandate is also reached its time limit, but here we are going to suggest that his mandate is renewed for a period of 3 years, and that will be resolution number 9. Resolution number 10 will be Jérôme Caz. Once again, his mandate expires, and we are going to propose that his mandate is renewed, this time for a period of 3 years. You remember that Jérôme was one of the first members of the supervisory board, and his mandate is now at an end. And lastly, amongst all other members of the supervisory board, we have Sonia Artinian-Fredou, who is resigning from her role as a member because she has a professional project at the moment which is occupying most of her time. So she is in fact launching a huge project in the Paris region for carbon decrease in industry. It's a really important project, and so bearing that in mind, she has preferred to resign from the supervisory board. So all the members, as you know, are volunteers. They're absolutely not paid. And I'd like now to go back to our resolution number 3, and I'm going to hand over to Damien. Damien, could we get in touch with Damien online? He is our financial auditor. And here he is. He is about to tell us about his special resort. Do you hear us, Damien? Absolutely. Very well. Thank you. So this resolution concerning the special report brings us to tell you that there are special conventions which are reglementary and which exist in a meeting like the one this evening. So you were able to read that we have 2 conventions which are in fact totally normal when we talk about cash in hand for Shiva company, and no remuneration was actually paid in this company for the last financial year, and that's why we don't have a report. Thank you, Damien, for those explanations. So, would you like to talk to us about our annual accounts? Yes. So, the annual accounts, right, according to French law, I am asked to examine them and to certify that I find them correct, as they were in the previous years. And so my role is just to guarantee that the accounts are legal, correct. And so in this report, I also give my word of honor and different appreciations with due diligence to be sure that the accounts are indeed all correct. And I have commented on the way shares are distributed. And I also presented there was a presentation by Denis, of the different companies that we own shares in. Thank you, Damien, for those explanations. And you're going to see these reports, which are on your voting space, if you want to look at them a little bit more in detail. So now, for the third resolution, I would like you to please note that these reports exist. And now, I think that's all as concerning the 2022 balance sheet. So let's have a look at this year's news. So thank you very much for following us for the accounts. Of course, we're going very, very quickly because we do have a lot to say this evening. So let's have a look at the news. So over to you. So very quickly, just so you know about the innovations, the latest innovations that we've already voted. So we have an authorization to invest with CIA. So they produce exhaust pipes which filter exhaust fumes and decrease carbon, and we decided to not advance with this project. We all had a few questions that we were asking ourselves, and for management reasons, we decided not to invest in this company. So there was a certain level of risk. It didn't exactly correspond to what we were looking for in terms of investment. And there's another company called Elo. And here we were thinking of investing. Things are going very well. There's a new team, and we've been talking about the amount we're going to invest, what it will be used for, their objectives. And at the moment, we are finalizing this project from a legal point of view, so that we will become shareholders in that company. And this will be concluded very soon. And over to you for the change of name. So we've changed name. We're not totally used to the new name. And we keep making mistakes and using the old name, in fact. But our new name is indeed Team for the Planet. And I think, there was this desire that we had to create a different identity based on a group phenomenon, on our team. And, Team for the Planet, who kept contacting us to ask us to change the name, it was getting a bit timing. So we changed. More news. Well, we needed to increase our team, and we have 4 people who have joined us, who are going to strengthen the team. We call them 4 new talents. That's what we say at the moment. What a pool of talent. So we're going to ask you to welcome Thomas, Ronan, Capucine, and François. And Capucine will be our new head of talents. And so I'm going to ask her to introduce herself. Good evening. Thank you for that introduction. So I'm Capucine, head of talent. I'm in charge of recruiting. And I'm really happy to be with you this evening. I've joined the team on the 2nd of May, so it's really new. But I wanted to help you recruit permanent staff, chief executive officers, and other sorts of stuff. So I've prepared a little quiz for you to know who we are. So I'm going to start with me. So who are you? I'm Capucine. I'm not very good at public speaking, but I'm going to get used to it. I'm in charge of recruitment. I used to work for a company called Insect, which scale up, which breeds insects to use their protein. So now I've joined the team, and my job, as I said, is head of talent. And my favorite saying, well, I hope I'm going to be able to say it, it's a bit long and I'm a bit stressed. It's patience is and a glass of white wine are better than a liqueur and courage. Now, I'm not encouraging you to drink, but I remember I heard this in a film. Am I happy to be here? Well, yes, of course I am. And I'd like to thank everyone in the team for a fabulous induction into the company. And so now let's carry on. We've only got 10 minutes, so we'll keep it short. François, over to you. Tell us who you are. Hello, I'm François Narty, and I'm from Grenoble, and I have a daughter who's 4, you know, and I'm about the same age as the rest of the guys here. And I used to work for a company called AUT Energy, and I'm going to take over the role of following the startups post-investment. And this is going to be so interesting when we are talking about raising funds and connecting with companies, identifying problems which are connected to fundraising. And so we're going to help these companies to deliver their own specific promises. So I'm, what's the favorite saying? Well, it's a bit difficult to translate, but it means keep your eye on the ball. I'm so happy to be with you. Hello, I'm Thomas Killen, and I used to work for the Duo company, an insurance company, and for real estate agencies and companies like Bouygues, big corporations in the field of the environment. And that brings me to the last question. I'm so happy to be with you. It was my dream. What did I miss out? I'm a developer. So my job is to make sure we have more and more shareholders. I'm going to talk about a quote. A smile is cheaper than electricity, but it lights everything up. That's my favorite saying, and it's wonderful. Hello, I'm Renan Lebruni. I'm from the Paris region, and I used to work for a company called Seed Capital, where I helped investors to find, assess, and manage their investments in companies. And I joined the TFTP project just 1 month ago. And in this role, I'm going to help assess the new innovations, especially of the market validation for these innovations, so that we can assess more and more innovations and be sure that the companies we invest in are scalable, as Mehdi just said. So I have to tell you that I'm very, very happy to be here too. And when I see the quality of the innovations that we're working on and the team around me, I think that we're going to do great things together. My favorite saying? All right, you need to take the bull by the horns to act and to get results. I think it's a pretty good saying. Thank you. Right, please help them, be with them.
Merci beaucoup pour eux.
Thank you so much on their behalf. And you'll be able to see them and to talk to them a little later on. One more thing, our team is getting bigger, but we had one person who left. That's Cécile, who left. It was a life choice after doing great work with us in this period. Where the UK is in the news. We wanted to give her a regal wave to thank her for all the great work she's done for us. We're going to take advantage of her departure to rethink our strategy for the coming years. And it's one of the main things that we'll be working on to redefine our international strategy. And now we have an explanation. When we spoke about associations, we're going to talk about how we distribute dividends. We do hope that in the coming months, we will be able to communicate how we distribute dividends and how much and how we distribute them. Are you concentrating hard? Listen carefully. It's simple. All the details are in the documents that you've already received and which go into detail. But our objective, if you like, for the resolution that we're suggesting to you tonight is first of all to explain that systematically every year all the climate dividends that we have will be distributed to all the associates in the company. And we're going to also suggest that we add a seniority basis. So when you've been a shareholder, an associate for a long time, we are going to add a sum which will be ponderated, and this will come into effect as from next year. And so we thought that it would be logical to add a seniority basis, which will count for 2 rather than 1, and this will be capped after 7 years. So it seemed to us to be a very simple way of adding value, recognizing the people who joined us some time ago and who continue to join us. It's really important to us. It's really brave, and sometimes it's even a little bit crazy, these pioneers who joined us. So we want to recognize their investments and add a little bit of value to them. These are the people who allow us to be where we are today. So thank you to everyone who joined us a long time ago and the people who continue to join us, because tomorrow they will be the seniors too. So that is a resolution, which is resolution number 13. We will ask you to vote on for or against as you wish, or you can also be able to abstain should you so desire. So, you remember that you can't sell these dividends. It's just a communication information which allows you to know the amount of the dividend. And this is why, we've decided to organize this. So it's a 1 ton of equivalent of CO2 that we're talking about. So now is the moment you've all been waiting for. We hope that you're still following, because we're going to talk to you about the 4 investments that we are proposing. Over to you, Denis. Thanks, Laurent. So no pressure then, huh? So we are very, very happy to be at this meeting because we have 3 new investments for you and 1 reinvestment. So here's the grid. So we did this right at the beginning of Time for the Planet, and we identified the different problems that we want to contribute to solving. So we have different sectors, we have different ways of working, and we are very, very happy that our bingo sheet, as we call it, is being more and more filled in. So we have different sectors, we have different ways of working, and we're very happy because, we had this repeat. So the bingo sheet is addressing the industrial sector. This is new because we didn't deal with this sector in the past. So here are the 4 innovations which correspond to the 4 resolutions that we're going to ask you to vote on. The first one is Archeon Energy. Now, this is a company in the field of building heating, and you can see that this solution is very complementary to the one we already have. It's working with Leviathan, if you remember what they do. So here we are going to have a look at the collective heating systems in buildings. and that is the Archeon solution. So building heating contributes a lot to the greenhouse gas effect. So it's something that we can see. You can see the figures here on the slides. We have almost 7% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which are caused by building heating systems. And one of the solutions that we already know, which really works well, which is very reliable, a very good solution for reducing carbon, is heat pumps. You know, it's an interesting solution to reduce carbon for the simple reason that it uses electricity. At least in France, it means that we're not relying on fossil fuels like oil or gas. And it's also interesting because some of these heat pumps are reversible. You know, they can both heat and cool in function of the outside temperature. But of course, there are a number of problems connected with heat pumps. And one of the first problems is question of performance. You know, we talk about the yield in terms of performance. So the average is 2.2 on average. So don't look just at the value, but the fact that heat pumps really depend on the delta of the temperature, the variation of outside temperature and inside temperature that you want it to heat up to. So that means that they're systems which are good, you know, if the difference between outside and inside temperature is very low, but if it's too hot or too cold, well, then their performance is not so good, unfortunately. One more thing is that we're talking about standardized models. So that's good for high volumes, but that means that we install them in new buildings only. We can't use this system in buildings which are being renovated, for example. So that's the Archeon system that we're having a look at. And they have what they call a smart pack. And it's a heat pump which integrates two main elements which are very innovative, and they're not destructive. We're talking about an incremental improvement of the current system, and the first evolution here is that it stores heat. So that means that it's as if we have two heat pumps. I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's as if we have two heat pumps which allow us to have a little bit of a storage. So it's really very, very hot or very, very cold. When we have extreme temperatures, we can compare that. So that means that we are far less dependent on temperature differences. It's a global performance solution. So that means that we have energy gains with CO2 and financial gains as well. And the second very interesting element is that the Smart Pact was designed not for standard solutions, but for modular solutions. So it can adapt to lots of different sorts of buildings. And that's really interesting because it can be adapted to old buildings, not just new ones. And that represents, the majority of buildings these days, obviously, because new constructions don't correspond to the field where we most need to reduce carbon. So we have a performance which is practically multiplied by 2 compared to standard heat pumps, and it can be used for thermal renovation, and there are not many solutions which are adapted to this particular field. And in terms of finances, it is not overly expensive. So to get people to decide on a collective investment, sometimes it's very difficult, and people are thinking about the price element, but this element is not overly expensive. So that means that Archeon can have a lot to say, be a priority solution in heating systems for old and new buildings. And we can proceed on a case-by-case basis, talk to all the builder owners in order to implement this heat pump solution. So all these characteristics will allow us to address a market which hasn't attracted a lot of attention so far. There are not many players. If I can give you a few figures for fuel, gas, electricity, in terms of the reductions that we're bringing about, here are the figures. So what do we appreciate here? For each innovation, we always have a look at the risk, the level of risk, and the level of maturity of a project. And that's from a management point of view, these are very important criteria. So, we have seen some carbon solutions which still need a lot of development. But Archeon is developing its prototype already. So that means it's very important for us. We're very close to the market. We have a solution which seems to us to be reliable with a low technology risk. We have a high potential impact in the sector concerned, and we're going to be able to have an impact very quickly. And we also think that our commitment to this positive impact and sharing is totally aligned with those of the founders of Archeon. Archeon Energy, we have some cases where they've already valorized the company, and there are some shareholders. So we're going to be able to become shareholders of the company and still act in collaboration with Leviathan Dynamics, which, as you know, is in a similar field. We're going to be able to work on a national and European level. And as I said to you earlier on, we have a high number of potential customers. As I just said, it seems to be totally in synergy with the solution proposed by Leviathan Dynamics. And all the shareholders, you included, will be able to be customers of Archeon Energy. So that means that we're going to accelerate the impact that we have in this field. So I'd like to present the resolution. It will be the first investment resolution that we propose to an investment decision for €2,250,000. This is the figure that we calculated with the colleagues, and we think that generally when we invest, we have a leverage effect. So if we invest a sufficiently high number, what's really important is that the majority of the work has already been done. They've already worked with ABEM in order to raise funds, and they do have a permit, an investment decision of several million euros. There are ABEM experts who've worked on this question, and one of the conditions of being able to use this leverage effect is that of obtaining €2 million approximately. So this sum of money will allow the company to be developed and give us a certain amount of leverage. So that is the first resolution, Archeon Energy.
Now the second you've already heard about, and the one you can talk about the founding members, because I hear Nicolas Clavel and Sancho Patra, who are here, and thank you for being here. The two innovators, we invested last year €100,000 to validate the promises of this solution. Today we're going to propose a reinvestment. We're very happy with our collaboration with these two innovators. They're here, they have a stand here, and they'll stay after the general meeting and to have a drink, and you can talk to them directly. For those who didn't follow or don't remember, here's a reminder. We're in hydrogen here. A lot is being said about the hydrogen as an alternative in the transition scenarios. We're not sure if it will be useful. We know it'll have in all decarbonation scenarios, and whether that's for mobility, for heavy industry, and for many other areas. The hydrogen that's used today has different colors, and it's not really a color, but it's a color system. We have gray to green hydrogen. We have mainly gray hydrogen. It's great for transferring energy, but right now to produce that, 96% of that is produced by fossil energy, which means we've just displaced the problem with still creating greenhouse gases. But we know now how to do that through electrolysis, which produces much less carbon, 4% only. Why do we have only 4% of this hydrogen being made by water? It's not a question, it's a technical question. It's a question of economics because today we have 3 to 4 times cheaper between fossil energy and green hydrogen. So it's the economic impact that is dominant. And so we have to work on yield, on co-production to launch green hydrogen. That's the limits of hydrogen for now, and that's where this innovation is really important. It'll allow it to be democratized, to be spread. Shiva says that they will use an organic treatment of the electrodes through water electrolysis. And what's really extraordinary is that it's not a very complex innovation. We just used wastewater, low quality, and we use that to do surface treatment of the electrodes, and we can produce hydrogen directly by using this wastewater. We bring characteristics to different electrodes, and we increase the yield in the reaction. We improve coefficient of 1.5 of hydrogen production by using this surface treatment. We didn't go beyond with things that we're looking at by using other types of water in the lab where we're looking at the performance. It's really interesting. It can be adapted to a lot of electrolysis technologies, alkaline, for example, electrolysis, which is the most widely spread, and it works for low, medium, and high levels of energy. And it's simple to manufacture, and you can improve yield without adding cost. So we have a simple system, which makes the economic factor much more interesting. That's what we like with Shiva. That's why we've moved forward with them. We had 100,000 to begin it. Now we would like to have a second wave of investment, which is something that can be replicated. It has an environmental aspect because we're looking at huge quantities of giga electrolysis systems for hydrogen production, and there's a societal investment because we can democratize access to hydrogen in certain areas of the world, give access to energy through solar panels. It's not the main mission, but we have access, CO2 access through this leverage. So there's that side line as well. And we have a real deep entente on the values, and that's something we've been able to really verify and confirm in the fact that we share the same values, and that's why this company and this solution, we think we should really be working together to develop the solution. Talk about a new investment, we're talking about up to 2 million euros. We're looking at the budget side. To that, when I made the slide, we had the exact figure. We can go up to 2 million euros, and the idea is to invest in their holding company and to become a majority shareholder for governance reasons. The founders and we have a strategy for the development company for the next year and a half to begin with, to improve the improvement of these electrodes. We're still at a laboratory phase, go to a production stage, and we have a development project to develop bigger electrodes and electrolyzers, and so that's work we're going to do together so we can serve several markets and to increase our knowledge on the development. And we said already that through this experimental phase and feedback from the field, and also we're going to work on the IP, intellectual property, and to try and strengthen our capacity to register new patents and to have greater knowledge about bacteriological action on this process, and also to have someone who will help to develop for giga electrolyzers, which is a whole new field. As we're asking you for an authorization today to reinvest, to go to the next stage. And one of the conditions, of course, before we invest this money was to have the definite return on the trials. We have the trials which are being finalized. We're asking you to vote now because we want to be able to develop as of next month and not slow down the innovation process. That's for Shiva. The third investment we're proposing is for a company called Entente. There's a special story here. Somebody who have been following this, we managed to stick together ultra-active quarks. They didn't see it coming for this meeting, is that Entente is one of the first solutions we ever looked at. It was the first of the things we looked at scientifically as of our first year. We didn't invest at the time, not because it wasn't viable technically. It had been backed by a group of citizens, by the scientific committee, which was really impressed, but we did not finalize it simply because in our idea we wanted a profile, an entrepreneur with experience, and the two scientists didn't want a third person, and they wanted to go to a traditional investment fund and a business angel, so they managed to work on that basis. Then Matthias said that despite the funds they raised, they have some difficulty today. Several types. They didn't have enough cash, they didn't sell their prototype, they didn't finalize their demonstrators. So there's a lot of tension between the two founders and the traditional investors who want results and they're not ready to reinvest in this context without having first tangible results. That's where we began to talk to them again to see if it was possible to help them really move forward with this innovation. So we began to talk, and if we're proposing the investment today, we made a proposal that they agreed to, so we can move forward. So what are we talking about? We're talking about heat for fatal heat. These are the lost energies. For example, a refrigerator, we have will create heat, and this heat is simply lost. There are a lot in many industries of these lost fatal heat losses. So this heat we can reuse. First thing is when you need heat in another process, you can put it back into a cycle. That's what's that you don't always need this heat. So there are other alternatives, is to create, for example, electricity, and that's something we do know how to do, which we can do with low temperature,
on le voit sur le graphe ici, c'est
bit
intéressant,
up to,
mais ça représente finalement qu'un gros tiers des
no,
chaleurs
sorry,
industrielles exploitées.
above
Et
150
donc, il y a les deux
degrees.
tiers qui
So
finalement
that
sont globalement
2/3
non exploités
of this
aujourd'hui en termes de
heat
chaleur
is
fatale.
not
Et
is
c'est là où
not
Entente, du coup,
used
entre en action
for
pour
any
bien changer la
purpose,
donne.
fatal
Puisqu'ils
heat.
proposent une
So we
solution
want
qui
to
permet
change this. They have a
de baisser les températures
solution
de,
that
enfin, les
can
chaleurs fatales, pardon, de basse
use
température,
heat
c'est-à-dire
at
des
lower
60 degrés.
temperatures from
Et
60
donc concrètement,
degrees
comment ils
on.
font? Alors je vais aller
So how
vite
do
sur
they
la
do
solution
that?
technique,
I'm
c'est
going
très
to go.
technique,
I'll go.
mais
It's
on est sur
very
une solution de type
technical.
ORC.
I want to explain, but
Pour
it's
ceux
an
qui connaissent,
ORC
pour
system.
la faire très simple, vous
For
avez la
those of
machine
you
à vapeur,
new,
vous avez l'ORC,
you
et là
have
on vient sur une amélioration de cette ORC.
we
Et
have
c'est un
an
ORC
increase
pulsé.
of
Et si je veux la faire
this organic
de manière,
Rankine
peut-être
system,
on a un petit graphe juste
which
après,
is
voilà.
it's
On
using
va
pulsed
améliorer
air,
finalement, grâce à cette solution-là
and
inventée par
we're going
Mathias,
to
le rendement de
improve
cette
because
solution
of Matthias's
ORC.
solution
Et comment on le fait?
the increase in ORC.
On est d'accord. On est
Thank you
d'accord,
for the
j'avais un doute.
graph. It's obviously
Donc, ce que je
much
vous
clearer
propose pour tous
now.
ceux qui ne comprennent pas ce
Now,
que je vais
for
dire là,
you
demain,
who don't,
il y a Antoine
those
qui
of you who
expose
don't
aussi dans
understand,
du salon et ils vous
these
l'expliqueront
people
encore
are
beaucoup mieux
here
que moi.
at the
Mais pour la
trade
faire très
show
simple, vous avez
and
cette
they'll
solution-là
explain
qui est
it
améliorée
really well.
d'un point de vue
This
thermodynamique
will
et
heat,
notamment
this will
là où
improve the
habituellement vous avez une turbine
thermodynamics,
qui tourne,
where
eux,
usually
ils
you
vont
have a
avoir un système
turbine,
de vérin et
they'll
un
have
système
a
pulsé de l'énergie. Et donc,
system
au lieu de
that
balancer de
works,
l'énergie
an
en continu,
ORC
ils
machine
vont avoir un système qui est
that
pulsé
pulses the
et donc
organic
du coup qui
fluid
permet d'améliorer
inside the
le
system
rendement
and
de leur
allows
solution.
you to have better
Ce qui est très
yield.
intéressant en tout cas, c'est qu'on
What's
va pouvoir
interesting
adresser,
is
comme
that
je
you're
l'ai
going
dit,
to
les
use
températures de 60 à 100
the
degrés en
temperatures
fonction
between
de
60 and
différentes
100
puissances.
degrees
Et donc là, on a
based on
accès
different
finalement à une
power
valorisation des chaleurs
points,
fatales
and
qui
then
aujourd'hui
we
était
have
clairement
access
perdue.
to fatal
Donc du coup,
heat
ça
that
devient
was
économiquement
lost up
intéressant
until
de les
now.
adresser
So
et
it
d'en
becomes
produire
truly
de l'électricité.
interesting
C'est pas des
to
rendements
produce
extraordinaires, mais ici on
electricity.
parle d'un
It's
déchet,
not
c'est quand même de
huge
l'électricité
yields,
directement qui est faite
but
à
it is
partir
a
de, enfin,
savings
à zéro coût si je fais
and that
l'installation.
we waste,
Notre vision, comme j'ai
we
dit, c'est
avoid waste.
très
Our
intéressant au
vision
niveau du contexte.
is interesting in the
Au niveau de
context.
l'impact, on est sur quelque
In
chose
terms of
aussi
its impact, we're
également intéressant
looking
parce
at
qu'il y a un
something
double
that's
intérêt. On vient réduire les
interesting.
émissions de
There's a
CO2 et en
double
plus on a cette
interest
logique d'économie circulaire.
because it
Donc
has
vraiment,
this
on a une
notion
version
of
assez développée
circular
par rapport à ce qui se
energy,
fait aujourd'hui
and it's a
dans
real
le domaine
breakthrough
de l'ORC.
compared to what is done in
L'innovation a été
ORC.
validée et valorisée dans plusieurs
The
concours qui nous
innovation
confortent sur
was validated
cette qualité
and
technique
assessed as
de
being
l'innovation.
useful
On est
because of
clairement
its
aligné avec Mathias
technical
sur les
quality.
valeurs. C'est
We're
un élément
on the
qui
same
est fort.
line as
Dès le
Matthias
départ,
for
vous
our
avez fait
values.
valider la discussion
That's
sur la notion
something
de
that's
licence
very
libre. Il est même
important.
très ouvert à ouvrir la
He's
licence libre
open
dès la phase
to
de conception, sans
open
forcément avoir finalisé le produit. Il est
to
complètement
open up
aligné
to us
avec les valeurs
to
TFTP.
at
Et
the
donc, comme je l'ai
design
dit, cette
phase like
innovation avait été
TFTP
proposée,
is.
mais
So
dans un contexte
this
délicat
innovation was
finalement
proposed
aujourd'hui. Elle nous
in a
revient.
very
Et donc,
fragile
on vous
context
fait une
before,
proposition
and
d'investissement
now we're
qui
making
est
a
une proposition en deux temps.
investment proposal
Alors du coup, les
in
chiffres
2
apparaissent là. Le
phases.
premier temps, c'est 600
You
000
don't have the
euros.
figures. To
600
begin
000
with
euros d'investissement qui
600,000
nous permet deux
euros
choses.
of
La
investments
première, c'est de
to allow us
finaliser
to
le
do two
démonstrateur et
things: to
donc de valider
finalize the
la
demonstrator
technologie,
and to
de
validate their
recruter également
technology, to
un
recruit
CEO expérimenté. Et donc dans ce cadre-là, finalement,
a really
on va
experienced
sortir le
CEO,
CEO actuel
and then
pour
we'll
placer le
ask the
CEO
CEO
expérimenté.
to
Non
leave
pas
and
qu'on juge le
bring an
travail qui a été fait
experienced CEO,
par le
not because
CEO,
we judge that
mais
the
simplement
current
parce qu'aujourd'hui, de toute façon, il y
CEO
a des
didn't
tensions. Et
do a
l'idée, c'est
good job,
qu'on
but
mette
there's
une dynamique
tension
positive dans la
today,
structure
and they want to
et on
create a
apporte une expertise
positive
différente
dynamic,
pour
and we bring
développer,
in a
et
different type of
finaliser le développement
expertise
de
to
la
go
technologie.
to the next
Et donc
stage
cet
of the
argent va permettre à la
technology.
fois de finaliser le
So this
démonstrateur,
money will
de
allow
trouver un nouveau CEO
to
et
find
d'un
a
point de
new
vue
CEO
gouvernance,
as
de
well,
prendre
from a
la majorité
governance
aussi
standpoint, to
de la structure au
take
niveau du
the
capital
majority
pour
of the
s'assurer,
structure
encore une fois, du déploiement
and to
en
make
licence libre
sure
et
that
de
we
notre
can
poids pour mettre en
deploy
place le
in
nouveau
free
CEO.
licenses
Et derrière,
and
un
to
deuxième temps
strengthen
d'investissement, une fois qu'on
their
aura validé
position in
cette technologie,
intellectual
qu'on aura la
property. And
personne
once we've done
CEO et
that,
que le duo sera
and the
reformé,
CEO
à ce moment-là, un nouvel
and the
investissement
inventors will
jusqu'à
work
2
together
millions
again,
d'euros au
we
total
will hope to go
possible. Ce
to up
montant-là, il sera
to
affiné de
2
manière plus
million
précise
euros. Will
pour
give
pouvoir
you
développer,
more
réindustrialiser cette solution
refined figure
et
to
également renforcer la
pre-industrialize
propriété intellectuelle
and
pour s'assurer
reinforce
d'un
the
portefeuille
IP
de
once
brevets
again,
solide.
to have a
Encore une fois, je le
good
précise, mais portefeuille de
patents
brevets ne veut pas dire
portfolio.
opposé à la licence libre. Au
That
contraire,
doesn't
ça nous
mean
fait
that
une
it's
base
not something
qui
that's
facilite le déploiement en
opposed
matière
to
de
free
licence libre.
licensing, but it gives us a base for free licensing. So that's resolution number 6 to invest in this company, which was evaluated 2 years ago for recovering fatal heat. So some of this money will allow us to buy back some of the current investors, to have them leave the capital structure and to give them a healthier structure and a better dynamic. There's a risk here, but it's interesting for us because we are quite sure that will bring in a new dynamics compared to traditional investment funds if we can use the new CEO, our network, and their invention. I hope you won't spend as much time for all of the investment proposals. Our last proposal, a new investment for Crymirotech. This time we're going to talk about plastic waste. Often we say, well, it's not really, we're all very aware, but does it concern us? We know that it has all sorts of impacts on biodiversity, on the oceans, etc. That pollution doesn't have the usual scope for Team for the Planet.
2-0.
But what's important to know is that waste management creates CO2s or methane, and in that sense, it's important for us to work on waste management. 4% of our greenhouse gas emissions in France are due to simple management of waste. The first is incineration, where we burn, we have greenhouse emissions, and then we have things that are using landfill, and we also have CO2, and there's several studies, but to give you an idea, 1 ton that's of waste that is sorted, pre-sorted, on all of that, there's 15 to 20% that is not recycled through mechanical solutions. For example, a toothbrush has 2 types of practice. You can't recycle it, and you haven't taken the rigid and the soft plastic in a wrapping, for example, of ham. Sometimes you have glue that does not allow you to recycle the material you could recycle. So there are many reasons for some of these sorted wastes that cannot be recycled, and so therefore they go into landfills or incinerated, which means about 300 kilos for each ton, and so it's very important. We're not saying that you shouldn't sort in the future, but to recycle everything if we want to avoid the incineration and landfill. So Crymirotech is interesting because it has revolutionized this part and paves the way for recycling 100% of plastics. How do they do that? Maxime, the inventor, has a recycling process. It's very technical. Through depolymerization, we have an ionic liquid with ionizers, so you can treat the mixes. So if he's understood that, so this innovation he's come up with, because knowing about this process, he has a process which would allow you to recycle all waste and all sorts of mixes of waste. And through Crymirotech, with its catalysts, and we can generate monomers, ethylene, propylene, and gases, which are then used in industry. So what's interesting, you can recycle all waste. That's a complement to existing mechanical solutions, but everything that is not sorted can be used. The catalyst can be reused. It's not something that we throw away the bath that we've used with all of the pollution that's involved, and in closed cycles. What's really interesting as well, with the expertise we've looked at when we've looked at it with Veolia or Suez, that there are many solutions, but one of the barriers for development is the economic impact, and if it's not part of a circular economy model, it won't be used. And we have a solution that allows us to produce monomers at a competitive price for industry in general, for the chemical industry, which are at the same price as monomers that would have been produced by fossil industry. So we become competitive because we have the same price and they have a better solution from recycled materials. So it has, and the final product of the system can be used to create value. So we have a double gain in CO2 at the end of the line, recover the 300 kilos for each ton of sorted waste, and then we can save CO2 because we'll have less needs for fossil fuels to create the monomers for the chemical industry. So it seems really interested. We're still upstream and we have a first prototype right now. We're going to have a demonstrator soon, but there'll be a real circular economy for all plastics. It's really a breakthrough procedure, and this is very unique in the way that it processes waste. For us, it's a textbook case. We have Maxime, who invented this solution, is alone today and has been for many years. So we're going to bring him money and a full team, a communications team, a network, first customers, and all of the added value the Team for the Planet can bring in for this sort of project. And as we did with Shiva, we're going to go stage by stage like Shiva. We'll begin with a small contribution of 300K with Olympia Dynamics to validate technology, with a semi-industrial demonstrator, first contacts to identify potential customers, and then to propose a new investment later on in the year, and that's resolution number 7, and ask for 300,000 euros for investment in Crymo-Rotech. Thank you, Denis. So there are all these, for all these explanations, thank you very much. What's really good is you get us to understand things that are quite complex and everybody seems to be able to understand. We're getting to the final phase here of our meeting, and before we vote, we'd like to answer your questions. The more questions, the longer we'll have to stay, but in any case, we welcome your questions, and we have written questions we had before our general meeting, so we'll take these directly. And for all of you who are remotely online, you can send these by email at admin@team-planet.com. And for the people in the room, you could please tell us your name before you ask your questions. Simply for the minutes of the meeting, we systematically want to have a record of people who are putting questions to us. Do you have a question from the room? And Renaud has a mic. Please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll take the written questions we've already received.
Est-ce que ce micro marche? Ah, génial.
Vu qu'il y a plein de bras levés, je donne un deuxième micro.
Since there are a lot of people raising their hands.
Est-ce qu'on a... Alors, je peux attaquer par une... Parce que
let's begin. One of our associates, I think she's someone who's been listening in, and she's an auditor. So she asked us a lot of questions about the finances. I think there are quite a few auditors here and who have a huge list of questions. And thank you for Sabine, who looked at these things closely, and we will answer all of these questions. Okay, let's go for the question. Good evening, everyone. Olivier Rochard, I'm sorry if some people have the answer. I'm talking here about the economic model. You have an annual deficit, that's understandable. So what's the economic model for the future so that we don't have negative results for the next 30 years? That's the first question. And for Shiva, you showed us that allows you to increase green rather than gray hydrogen, but this technical solution, I don't understand how it cannot be used for gray hydrogen. Because if I've understood the question, why can't they also use it for gray hydrogen as opposed to green? I'll take the economic side and I'll let you answer the technical side.
Alors, sur le modèle économique,
on our economic model, from the moment we began Team for the Planet, we always said there's one thing we didn't want to do, which is to be a service provider. These are a lot of projects that have the same idea as Team for the Planet, but who, by being service providers for big companies, end up being simply service providers for big companies. We were given the opportunity for a lot of these things to assess, to incubate, to be consultants. A lot of big companies proposed that. We always refused. Team for the Planet never issued an invoice. We could decide to do things differently, but we don't think that that would be right because we have a small team, and by being a service provider, we're going to recruit people to carry out these services, and we'll forget what our raison d'être, which is to fund innovation. So we're closer to an investment fund. You raise money, you invest, and some of that money is used for the people who work to find the innovations and the investment funds to manage that and to follow up on that. That's our model. And before then, clearly, since we have no sales for the time being, but only expenses, we have a negative result. So that's true for every fund. When we begin to generate profits, that's when our innovations will begin to generate profits. Since we're shareholders, we'll get dividends. And if we sell a company that we have invested in, will have the benefits and the profits. So now, from now on, we want to use some of our funds from the innovations to allow us to have a cash flow, to have a euro available for a euro invested. And that's TI's approach. So if somebody wants to leave and people want to buy, when people want to sell their shares at the purchase price, we've always done this. So we'll give you a guarantee of liquidity. We'll have the money that's available to allow people to leave. And beyond that, well, we'll be able to use the funds to reinvest, and we'll balance our books at some points on our P&L, and so we can have an excellent turnover. So we won't just use the money of from the income and from an IP. So there'll always be a way. That's our model. We raise funds and we'll have climate dividends. At this point, that's the way it works.
Shiva. So green hydrogen is produced in a different way by burning gas. So we can't use gray hydrogen because it's connected to water hydrolysis. So it has to be no carbon. That's the only variation that we can have, and we have to be sure that the electricity we use is decarboned electricity, like nuclear energy, for example. And the first developments that we've carried out, we have high level of compatibility with renewable energy so that we can use this solution. So that's why, because of the process, we can't be using gray hydrogen. But the only thing we have to be careful about is the type of electricity which is used to make it function, to make it run. But it won't be gray hydrogen. It'll be an intermediate solution, which is a lot less rich in carbon. So in the new technology that we're going to develop, there'll be a whole system of interfaces to facilitate other solutions with a little electrolyzer with an integrated system by creating different segments which target specific markets. So we're going to have to work on reducing the carbon of electricity on a global way. You know, we won't be able to have leverage on the whole solution, of course, but we're going to be vigilant. So we want to answer a maximum number of questions. So could you please be a little briefer for the other questions? I have a question sent by Sabine Perrault, who says, we have a certain number of questions about how do you explain the increase, the high increase of salaries paid in Team for the Planet. Well, this is connected to the fact that before 2022, the number of co-founders were not paid. So we've started paying ourselves for the last 2 years, and in January 2022, our salary costs increased in 2022 to a large extent, you know, from zero, in fact, the following year. So this is connected to the fact that we only started paying ourselves last year. What are the jobs? Well, all this is in the activity report that we communicated to you. But very quickly, the team was consisted of 10 people, including Hugo, who is in charge of all the video filming and who takes care of millions of things concerned with relationships with the Galaxy, with shareholders, and even more. And then we have Emma in charge of fundraising, Claire too for big investors, Denis in charge of process and innovation, Mehdi, who's in charge of different subjects and new subjects that we're dealing with, fundraising, and other subjects. Very often he works in tandem with other people in the team. We have Nicolas, who is working on our vision and organization of the community, Arthur for communication, and Cécile, who used to work on the international level. And I think that's it. And then me. I work on governance, legal aspects, financial questions. That's a very, very quick overview. And we had another question. What are the needs, future needs? Well, we listed all the needs with the 4 new people who are now on board this year. And they introduced themselves just now. So we had recruitments then last year, people who have just arrived on board, in fact, in the last few weeks. And what are we looking for now in terms of recruitment? Well, Mehdi, would you like to answer? Yes, there's something that we're going to launch. We need somebody to help us organize really big events. If you know anybody, if you've got a friend or colleague who is good at organizing large-scale events, we're interested. So we've identified a certain number of needs in terms of development and what we consider our future needs will be. And so, you know, at a given moment in time, we say, well, you know, maybe it would be worth our while recruiting somebody when we're working on a given point, when we have been for a long time. So how do we recruit people? Well, it's another question from Sabine. That will depend on the need, because if we need perhaps somebody for half a day a week, we will probably outsource that. But, you know, sometimes for the IT developers, they're very often freelance. And that's the way that we prefer to work at the moment, working with freelancers. It seems more flexible. Why was there a question in the accounts about a little problem that came up? Yes, we had an industrial court case. Could you explain what happened? Well, we were sued by somebody who worked in the Galaxy and who didn't have a work permit, but who was never had a job, who was never paid. But he tried to take us to court in order to get a little bit of money. So we tried to deal with this problem by really defining volunteer jobs. We don't have any the results of this court case at the moment. It's an industrial, a professional court, but we'll keep you up to date when we advance, because the court case started at the beginning of the year and we're waiting for the final verdict. So, all these cases, are mentioned in the report that you received. What about the bonuses and the gratification? So it wasn't mentioned in the 21 report, but sometimes, it was connected to our change in our pay software, which mentioned a certain category of remuneration. For Claire, for example, went to Canada, and when she was in Canada, we reimbursed a certain number of fees, and we gave her a bonus, an expat bonus. So that's something that we put into place through time, and it seemed to be a good solution to deal with that particular bonus. So CSR is a very important subject in the company. So what is your action plan in-house? Who is in charge of CSR? And another question, what are you going to choose to protect in terms of modularization that you're carrying out, which are not, haven't yet finalized? Well, the CNCA is the National Convention of Financial Auditors. Here's an example. Right, Mehdi's going to talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility. From an environmental point of view, there is the carbon result. We are below average for our sector. And for the raison d'être, the reason for being for the CFTT is we hadn't really planned to do anything more. And for the social part of your question, as I mentioned just now, we have had a case of burnout in our team, and this was a problem. And we were really much aware that it could be a potential problem, and we're taking the steps necessary to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So that is clear that it's a very important question. And over and above that, as far as the social aspect of things is concerned, we have a system, the way that we organize work, people can work in our premises in Paris and Lyon or work remotely as they prefer. In Grenoble, we have some people who work in Laval, people who work for us now. And, we don't expect to open new offices. So people work remotely. So that seems important for us. I don't know if you have any more specific questions on how we organize work. So concerning the annual accounts, so the auditors and the accountants are working on the reports, but very often we are so innovative that, sometimes, we say that when we've advanced a little bit and the companies that we invest in are making profits, it will be easier to draw up our accounts, because it's very difficult for our accountants to really understand the way we work. I don't know, when our investments are totally finalized, it's going to be a little easier for us to draw up a new way of looking at the balance sheet. What about equity? how the number of men and women in the company, parity. So at the moment, we have managers, general managers. We have 5 men, 2 women, but then now Cécile has left. So that means we only have 1 woman, and we have 2 people who are officially managers and who have the powers of legal powers of management in the company. That's the general managers. And when we discussed with our supervisory board and when we increased our remuneration, you know that in the French law, a general manager has a high degree of power. So we were told that it wasn't a good idea to share out this power over too many people. You know, even if the way we take our decisions is a very collegial way of working. So the members of the supervisory board, and this is very important, you know, we're working on this question so that we can organize a certain ways we define our governance. So annual accounts, we had 80,000 euros, which correspond to about 50% of the production of videos, which were carried out by external companies, motion design. Some of that sum were for services on market surveys, for example. You know, sometimes we outsource that particular service. So those are the main expenses we've had. We have a graphic artist that's included. Translation, woo woo, that's us, right? Yes, we are translating, and yes, we do give you a bill. It's not very high, but it is included in your expenses. And no, you're not speaking too quickly this evening. We are managing to keep up at the moment. So yes, they're saying that we deserve our salary, and we're very, very happy to hear that, even though it's a pleasure working with you as usual. So those are the main expenses which are included in that account. So one more question from Sabine. In the account 62826, what is that? Denis is going to answer this question. There are 7,000 euros approximately, which correspond to all the studies about the climate dividends. Yeah, we were helped here considerably by Carbon 14 for the creation of carbon dividends. And Net Zero Initiative also helped us draw up the protocol and the reference grid, which a lot of companies actually use. And we paid them a little money. So, Sabine, I do hope we've answered all your questions. And they're only Sabine's question, and now Clément has 20 questions. No, don't worry, it's only a joke. But Clément does have 1 question. Clément Lepouillat? The climate dividends, how do you integrate them? There are different ways of accounting these dividends. You talk about energetic efficiency, 20% gain in terms of effectiveness. So in that case, could we understand that by a gain of 20% of CO2? So how do you put this into accounts, basically? Denis, Mehdi? Difficult question. So the rebound effect is one of the criteria which has been defined in the innovations. And this rebound effect exists elsewhere, not just in the field of energy, as from the time when you implement something which allows you to decarbonate, then, basically it is of no use because Time for the Planet would be of no use unless, the Commission of Restraint had their words to say. We never said that we're going to save the project. We're just one little element of a long, long chain. And if there are more boats which sail on the sea with kites, it'll be much better than if there are fewer boats that do so. Important point. The rules and regulations help us here. And this is something which is very collective, because when the politicians actually do their work, there is an impact because there are rules and regulations which allow the shipping companies to decrease their carbon impact. So I'm being asked to hurry up. But I've got to answer the question, guys. So this helps us a lot because it means that we have the solution which helps people to actually respect the law. And this will become the solution which is most used in the future. That's great. So 2 more questions from Jean-Baptiste. You say in the activity report that what is the share of companies Oh, that's very quick. I'm not sure I understood the question. Let's listen to the answer. Yes, you did go very quickly. The fact of having 100% of carbon emissions when we are not an owner of 100% of the shares of the company. Well, this works like a financial dividend. If I have 10% of shares, then I'm allowed to have 10% of the result. And it's the same for us. In the contracts that we have drawn up with companies, if somebody has 10% of the action, do they have 20% of the votes or 50% of the dividends? And that's that is decided after discussions. So we are certainly ready to contribute far more without, asking for anything in exchange, anything more in exchange. But we do want to have more impact indicators. So we want to be able to demonstrate more and more that we have greater impact. We want to be able to demonstrate that the arrival of Team for the Planet had a clear, decisive effect. And so this would justify working in this way. But that means that we have to define an agreement with the company concerned to see, what we get in exchange in terms of climate dividends. Jean-Baptiste, another question about the sales figures. What does the sales figures correspond to, the revenue? No, we talk about sales, we talk about sponsoring, companies which could become shareholders, for example. And of course, sometimes we re-invoice. That is what our revenue consists of. Are there any questions from the floor? Good evening. Thank you for that presentation. I have a question, Mehdi, about Coolroof for the free license. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this license functions? Are there any competitions? What would happen if there were competitors, for example? Yes. I'm going to give you one example that we wrote a document called Open Source Cash Machine, which develops all the different business models or certain business models which are possible. And there's one that has attracted our attention on the carbon market. But that when you emit CO2, you have to have a certificate and you have to sell it on the carbon market. And here, one example of a potential business model would be that when we get the license, for example, then we would have to declare the number of tons of CO2 concerned. And we sold And so that could be the way that we would work, for users of a given license. And the license holders generate revenue, and we are investing in the company. So what we were doing is just recuperating information. So that seems a very cost-effective way of working. So we invest in technology in order to improve it and perfect the system, and then we're able to distribute financial dividends. The climate dividend is just an indicator. It's totally separated from the carbon market. Emmanuel has a question. Why are you not replacing the people who left the supervisory board? Good question. Well, you said that we have 12 members of the supervisory board, and we have noticed that the more people there are on the board, the more complicated it is to make decisions. So when people left, we thought it was good time to take the opportunity to not renew them, limiting the number of people in the supervisory board. And we thought this was better than recruiting new members. Question from Emmanuel Bosson. We have questions coming. I'm trying to deal with them in order. So it's a bit difficult because I've got the light in my eyes here. Good evening. Florent Yvon. I have a question. I like to complete the question that we previously heard about the deficit in the business model, to see, if we can have an infinite deficit, from one year to the next. What would happen if there's not enough money which comes in from one year to another? Would that mean that we'd have to invest less money in innovations? That's the first question, and I've got another one. About what's the ideal number of people in a permanent team for you? And also, I'd like to ask about salaries. I wanted to know how you decided on the amount that you would pay the directors, and how you decided, that what the salary would be compared to the permanent staff. Let's stop there. First question was about the eternal deficit in our results. No, from a legal point of view, nothing stops us from doing that, but as long as there's cash in the bank. But the second thing is that there's something that does limit us, and that is the percentage of fundraising which we can use for fixed expenses, fixed assets. So, initially, we raised funds just through the efforts of our founders who didn't have a salary at that time. So 10%, was pretty good. But now there are a lot of things which have been put into place, and they all need extra recruitments with management expenses, web development expenses. Also, all this needs money, and we have to reposition ourselves in accordance with market standards, which is about 20%. The amount from investment funds or in the world of association, it's the same sort of thing. So this is why we have proposed this resolution to you tonight. It's about the size of the question about the size of the team. So far we're very, very busy, and in one day perhaps the same person could be found working on script for a video, for communication, and then to assess the pertinence of an innovation from a technical point of view, and then later to go and ask questions to innovators in a company who needs a little bit of help. So people are doing very different jobs, so we really needed to be more structured, and we needed to recruit.
contre, on a mis une annonce, on a traité 120 candidats.
So how did we do? You know, we put an ad, we had 120 applicants,
Donc, en fait, voilà,
we did
c'est un
20
travail
interviews.
énorme, donc on a besoin de
So that was an enormous effort.
professionnels de chaque
So
secteur.
that's why we recruited Celia
Vous voyez d'ailleurs
to
bien,
look after
ce qui
recruitment.
se
And you can
passe.
see
Sur la
that
nouvelle
what
équipe,
happens
on a
here,
quelqu'un maintenant
that, you know, now we have somebody taking care of recruitment. We have somebody to take care of, you know, innovations. We've got, so all this is allowing us to become more and more structured and to gain time so that we can better prepare our future. I'm sorry, but our technical team said that we've got to finish at 9 o'clock at the very latest. So we're going to consequently have to curtail our Q&A session. You know, I know you may have some more questions, but we're going to have to proceed now to the voting session. So thank you very much for all your questions.
So we have thanks from Sabine for having answered all her questions. So now, for those who haven't voted yet, you can vote on all of the resolutions. Do you have that, Elizabeth? Thank you. So you've seen that you have to click on your vote remotely if you haven't voted yet, and then you will be able to vote on all of the resolutions. So here are the resolutions. Number 1 is for approval of the financial statements and discharge the management board. Second is the allocation of the income for the year to bring it forward. That's what we do classically when we have a deficit. Also to validate the report of the statutory auditor. Fourth is the investment in Archeon Energy, which Denis presented, and it's our core business. We propose that you vote for if you agree with us. The fifth resolution is for Shiva, same thing, for an investment, a second investment. In fact, they're here, they're watching you, and so therefore we propose to vote for. The sixth is for Entente, for investment in a first investment, initial investment in Entente. So we recommend voting for. Sixth is Cryomyotech. So it's a second investment. We also recommend voting for. And finally, eighth resolution is simply to validate the departure of Patricia and also Sonia and the other people, three resolutions to go to modify the powers of management, 20% limit on expenses, to go from 10 to 20% for the funds raised, and there's a note on that subject, and you also were able to see a video, also to have a new part of the statutes, and the last resolution is simply for the ability to carry out the formalities for our lawyers and power attorneys for these people. For those who have problems with votes, you can send your email, and to give you of your votes, you can write to us by email to admin@time.com. We don't have it on screen here. We're going to try to generate the results of the votes. We should have these quite soon. I'll look at our auditor, so I'll go and check. Can you give us the current results. So we don't have a mic to translate right now. We can't hear the gentleman on stage without a mic. So we'll give you the temporary results. Have you got the remote control device?
En attendant que ça mouline, du coup, si vous avez fini les votes,
while they're processing the votes, we talked about Seakite, the demonstrator boat. They christened the ship, and we have a video to show you what happened for the christening AOC Yves Parrier, who is the supporter. So I'll show you this video which shows you what's happening with time. It's the green ship. It's not the one. It's not the frigate in the back.
Très heureux de faire le baptême du Seakite aujourd'hui au salon nautique et à Arcachon devant notre public et nos fans. Alors,
so we're with our fans here, and we've went to many. We were on many races, Vendée Globe, for example, and the friendship between Isabelle and me meant that when I was in my first Vendée Globe in 1992, she provided me with a new mast because I had a broken mast 2 days in, and she gave me a part to be able to continue to sail. It's also because she's very committed supporter, my godmother, so to speak, in her role as the president of WWF, and she's always defended the environment. She's been a militant for the environment and Sail Energy, and the Beyond project is something she believes in, and we're very lucky, a country here that's very much focused on shipbuilding and a fantastic access to the water, so we can find local partners and hope to sell in France and sell abroad. We need technology to decarbonate everything on Earth, and we see how much we're suffering because of climate change and greenhouse gases, and so that's a huge objective. It takes time, and we need people like Yves who develop technologies, because we invent new things, and the idea of putting kite surfs on big merchant vessels, perhaps several hundred meters long, may seem crazy. It won't account for all of their needs for propulsion, but we will not be able to succeed unless we combine innovations. And the first thing we have to do is we also need to stop filling our closets with things that we don't really need, that we import from China. So there'll be other things that need to be transported, things we need, and so we have to have the means which are lower in carbon. We have to stop natural gas, petroleum, and carbon-based products, and so we need new means to decarbonate for countries near and far to exchange. So we need technologies to develop these new methods.
Voilà, ça vous donne une petite actu. Alors,
that gives you
au cas où ça met beaucoup de temps pour
an
update,
update,
mais
because it's taken quite a long time. But this General Assembly was a lot quicker, so we now have the results that we can present. And thank you for our supervisors. There'll be a few more votes that will come in from the email, but these are pretty well final results. So what's the first resolution? First resolution on the accounts. double vote, number of 4,064 people, 4 and 6 against, and some abstentions, 4,456 votes for, 10 voters against. So the resolution is adopted for the double vote on the first resolution. So double vote is systematically done. We have to have a majority and number of people and points. It's a double majority that we use at Team for the Planet. Second resolution for the results, accepting the financial result, number of people against 4,044, against 9, and number of votes 4,950,922 for, and 1,401 against. The resolution is adopted. So if you applaud for each resolution, it's going to take us a lot more time. So why don't we just clap at the end? The third, the auditing, the independent auditors. The person was here. 4,037 for, 6 against, 4,943,197, 160 against, adopted. Fourth resolution, authorization to invest in Archeon. 4,074, 39 against, number of votes 5 million plus, against 8,000 against. Resolution is adopted. Obviously, I wanted to zoom in so they can read the results. Reinvesting in Shiva, 3,965 for, 84 against, 5,739 plus 5 million, 14,000. We can't follow the figures exactly, so we'll give you the figures rounded off. So it's adopted. Authorization to invest in Entente for 4,018, 49 against, 5 million plus votes for, and 4,000 plus against. The resolution is adopted. Investment in Crimiotech, 4,044 people vote against, 7 million for, and 4,000 plus against, so therefore it adopted. For the end of the mandate of Pauline Brunel, number of votes, number of people for 3,963, 26 against, number of votes 5 million plus, for 2,000 plus against. So we therefore accept her resignation. But the idea is that we accept her resignation. Then the end of the mandate of Annika Pascal Ostachi, who's the president of the Supervisory Council, and the renewal of his mandate, 3,906 people for, 19 against, 5 million plus votes for, 909 votes against. Therefore, the president is confirmed in his functions. For Jérôme Chaz at the Supervisory Council, and to renew his mandate, 3,904 and 5 million votes plus for, and 84,000 plus against. So Jérôme Chaz in fact, is is confirmed in his functions on the Supervisory Council. The last one, the resignation of Sonia Artiniafrodou, 3,800 people, 3,019 against, 5 million votes plus, few thousand votes against. Therefore, the General Assembly accepts her resignation, and therefore 4 resolutions left. The change of Article 18 for management, number of people voting, 3,904, 5 million plus once again, 18,000 plus against. A resolution is accepted. Integration of the climate dividend in the statutes and the calculation system that Mehdi and Laurent, 4,917 for, 39 against, 5 million plus 4 and 5,000 plus against. Therefore, the resolution is accepted. And finally, for accomplishing the formalities, power of attorney, 4,033 for, 8 against, 5 million plus votes for, and 660 against. The resolution is adopted. Thank you very much to everyone for this general meeting, and thank you for having been so numerous. We're going to leave, and we'll maybe put up where we're going. Cité Comptoir, which is just on the other side of the Cité Internationale, and you'll have bars and restaurants, and we're going to Cité, the Comptoir de la Cité, and let's all get together and we can